Okay, welcome to the live stream for February 28th, 2018. My name is Dana Morningstar. This is a live stream we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it runs for about 3 hours. So welcome, lots of people on tonight. Healthy Love, Karen, Phil, Child of God, welcome, welcome. Healthy Love, I got your message, but I didn't have a chance to respond before the live stream. So I'll catch up with you either really late tonight or tomorrow at some point. Oh gosh, Dude, Janet, Mo, D-Mel, Donna, Stacy, Chanty, welcome, welcome. How's everybody's week been going? Anything new? Anything exciting? Thanks, LP. LP says, good evening, Dana. Thanks for all that you do. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much. Earl is here. Welcome. River, Mora, Connie, Blue Moon. Donna, Donna says, I caught you in Angie's program and it was great. Well, thanks. Yeah, Angie. So for those of you that didn't know, Angie Atkinson and I are doing a live stream on Tuesdays at 1:30 p.m. and we're going to Eastern time, and we're going to be alternating channels. So last week it was, well, yeah, yesterday it was her channel. Next week it'll be my channel. So make sure that you're subscribed to both of us so you can get alerts when we go live. And yeah, I actually felt really bad about, oh man, I tell you. So if you didn't hear the live stream that I had with Angie, the topic of like self-protection came up, and we started talking about, well, not me really started talking about guns. Not this is like one of those moments that I just cringe, and it makes me so nervous, the stuff that comes out of my mouth, because I'm just talking and I'm not thinking about what I'm saying to probably to the extent that I should be. This is an ongoing issue that I have, but especially when it comes to being on live, and YouTube is really cracking down on topics, especially like that. So like, violence and all this. I don't know. I just didn't even think about it until like afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, I hope I didn't get her channel in trouble or like put her in too much of an awkward situation. It wasn't intentional. It was, yikes. So, oh, Dana. Yeah. Dude, trust me, says, I was just fired by my psychopathic boss. It sucks, but I'm free. She can't hold my job over my head anymore. Well, yeah, but that's a good attitude to have. And I think sometimes life is so funny how it works sometimes. Like we might be in these situations that are just, incredibly stressful and intolerable. And we're so anxious and stressed, and going to work becomes this awful kind of impending doom type feeling when you've got a boss like that, or when you have a coworker like that. And sometimes it takes us getting fired in order for us to leave. Like, we know we should have left probably a long time ago, but there's like that certain, it's the same in any problematic situation. Like, we know we should leave, but we don't want to leave. And it's difficult to try to find a new job. And like, well, what if the new job has its own set of issues and isn't as great as the old job? And, like, it's so easy to stay in a bad situation and to try to rationalize it. And then, so sometimes, yeah, getting fired really can be just this huge blessing in disguise. And hopefully now you can really find a job that you don't have a psychopathic boss, and that is more nourishing for you. So, okay, let's see. Janet says, my daughter says when I talk, I have no filter, but at this age, I need to say what I feel more often. Yes. Yeah. I think it's, there's that line, right, of like saying what we need to say and like walking in our authenticity, and then just being like, uh, you know, being problematic ourselves, or hurting people's feelings, or just, I think there's, not to say that you do this, but that same mentality because I don't know. So like I've said the same thing too. Like, well, I just like, well, I guess I just said that, right? Like I talk and I am sincere what I'm saying in the moment. And then I think about it later. I'm like, man, I really maybe shouldn't have said that, or I should have reeled that back a little bit, or, what have you. There's a lot of abusive people that will kind of hide behind that line of thinking of like, oh, well, I just speak my mind. And, if other people don't like it, too bad. This is just who I am. And it's like, yeah, but it's one thing to speak your mind. It's another thing to be verbally abusive, right? Or like emotionally abusive. So not saying that you are, but just saying, because I think that's important to have that qualifier in there. Ooh, what storm? Postmodern saying, I'm finishing sweeping my back porch in preparation for the storm. Yes, postmodern says, Dana, you just took a shower. Haha. Yes, my hair is still wet. I used this moisturizing hair mask, and my hair, I normally just let my hair air dry when it's curly if I don't straighten it. this this hair mask was like super moisturizing, and my hair is like not drying. So yeah, I thought about this. I'm like, well, maybe I should blow dry my hair before I go on, but then I'm like, I'm not going to straighten it. So then it's just going to result in really frizzy hair if I blow dry it. Uh, First world problems, right? People are talking about zodiac signs. Mora says, yeah, ain't no particular sign and no more compatible. Okay, basically saying, narcissists come in all zodiac signs. I agree completely with that. Okay, River, that's a great question. Says, can you talk about complex PTSD? Can our bodies develop a nervous twitch or other problems from it? My eye is twitching all of a sudden. It's very embarrassing. So, yeah, so PTSD, complex PTSD, is tends to be the result of more like emotional trauma over time, whereas kind of quote unquote normal PSD, or how people tend to think of regular PTSD, tends to be from like an event. So a person gets in a car accident, or they go to war, or they see something traumatic. There's kind of that one event that causes kind of this flashbulb moment in their brain, that their brain just hangs on to it, and they just really struggle with trying to move forward past that event. Complex PTSD is more of just that ongoing emotional stuff. It's a culmination of trauma over time, and it results in very much the same type of things. It can be very confusing for a person who has complex PTSD to and here's the thing real quick. Complex PTSD is not in the DSM. So if you were to go to a mental health clinician and they were to talk about you maybe having PTSD, it's it's kind of lumped under, not kind of, it is, it's just lumped under PTSD. So don't let that confuse you if you're talking to a mental health clinician and they don't know what you're talking about if you're talking about complex PTSD. So um but yes, so one of the reasons complex PTSD flies under the radar for a lot of people is because it is kind of this culmination of trauma over time. And so, for example, back to the regular PTSD, because it's more direct cause and effect. A person gets in a car accident, now that PTSD tends to manifest in more specific ways. It's always specific and general, but like they might have a fear of getting in a car again, or anxiety about travel. Like lots of people had PTSD after 9/11. Like they were afraid to be on planes, they were afraid to be in buildings. They, you know, just had, it was just, they had a lot of trauma, understandably so, surrounding that event. Complex PTSD, where this can be difficult for a person to identify, is we might have been in a situation with somebody where there was maybe verbal abuse or emotional abuse, or even so. The way that I experienced this was with Jack living a double life. Even though I didn't experience any like verbal abuse that time. It was a lot of psychological abuse, but I wasn't aware that that was what was going on. There was a lot of projection, and then there was a lot of gaslighting, and a lot of like just malicious. Again, I didn't see the situation clearly until I was out of it. And even then it took me several years. And when I began putting together that he was living this double life and that I really feel like he was trying to poison me or kill me somehow, and it was all of just this craziness came to a head. I felt like I had PTSD, but I didn't feel like, I didn't know why. I was like, okay, yeah, I got tangled up with this like emotional and financial con artist, but you know, that was it was very confusing for me. And so with other people too that might go through emotional abuse and verbal abuse and that kind of stuff, they might realize, okay, this is why I'm feeling this way. Like, I'm scared of people, I'm scared to date again, I'm having anxiety, I'm having nightmares, I'm depressed, I don't want to leave my house, um, I am having trouble sleeping, I have night terrors, I can't focus, I don't know what's wrong with me, I feel like I'm losing my mind, um, I feel like I'm a very different person. There's just this sense of kind of this fragmented identity and a sense of paranoia and hypervigilance about things, and things that may or may not even be related to this situation. So you might find yourself, so for example, again, for me, like, I still have a really exaggerated startle response. I've had that for years. It's, you know, I, it's just there. And, um, there's no like direct correlation to it. It's just our bodies process emotions in very strange ways. Like, some of the ways that are more obvious than others, right? Like I was saying, okay, you're terrified of strangers because you were hurt by somebody that you cared about, and you're terrified to date again because you got hurt by somebody that you were dating. That kind of stuff. But then like the seemingly unrelated stuff, like, man, I'm really really jumpy all the time, like to a point where other people really notice it, and they're like, what is wrong with you, um or night terrors, or um just kind of really having trouble focusing, or just feeling jittery, like you were saying, having eye twitches, um all kinds. There's gastrointestinal issues, inflammation, chronic pain, um pain that kind of moves around a person's body, headaches, um yeah. So anxiety and depression just manifests in a whole host of ways. I would encourage you, if that's something that you're struggling with, there's videos here on YouTube for EMDR and EFT. If you can afford to go to a therapist, if you can find a good one that's trained in EMDR and EFT, those are very highly effective therapies for PTSD. If you can't, there's a lot of videos out there on YouTube that might be worth looking at and seeing. It's it's stuff that you can do yourself. It's always nice to process that stuff with a trained therapist, but if that's not possible, whatever, just realize that there is stuff on YouTube. Okay. Leslie's saying, yeah, she had problems. She had trouble with being very nervous as well. Wonder Woman was saying, I'm so depressed because the narcissist is giving me 1 week to get the house ready for listing it on the market. I'm shocked. I knew it was coming. I just thought I would get more notice. Now I'm paralyzed. Well, and something that might help you with that would be to set a timer. So every day, and doing sprints. That's one of the things that I use for many different ways, for many different reasons, to get myself going. Is I will set a timer and do different sprints. This helps when I'm depressed. It helps when I'm overwhelmed with any type of task. It helps me it's because it's basically setting yourself up for, it's building momentum. It's giving yourself a bunch of small wins. So if you can set a timer for 15 minutes and then hit one room really, really hard, and then try to set a goal of doing a handful of different sprints every single day. This is also how I go about writing books. Is I will set a timer and then I'll just hit one chapter really hard for 15 minutes, and then I'll go take a 10-minute break, and then I'll come back and do another sprint, and I just keep doing writing sprints. Then it kind of makes it more fun. It's like a game, and you're not so overwhelmed with like, oh, I have to write a full book, or oh my gosh, I have to clean this whole house, or I have to pack up this whole house. It's like, nope, all you got to do is just hit the bathroom really hard for 15 minutes and then hit your bedroom really hard. It's amazing the stuff that you can get done in short bursts of time like that. And have you already contacted a realtor and talked to them about things? Because they can, depending on the real estate market you're in and all of that, they might be able to take a series of photos over a series of days. So you can get your house up on the market, but maybe you can say like, hey, can you come by and take some exterior photos, and then we just kind of plan it out to kind of see if you can give yourself some more time, because 1 week is not very long. Oh, you're kidding. I did not know that. Sable says we've had storm after storm down here in the Gulf. Rain dazed. Oh no, that's terrible. I need to call my dad then. He is in Houston, and they had they got hit with that last big hurricane, and they had their house didn't flood per se, but it flooded to the point where they had about 3 inches of water in the main level, and they had to rip up everything, including kitchen cabinets. I mean, flooring, kitchen cabinets, everything had to go because it was contaminated water, appliances, everything. And so I think they are just now getting their house back to normal. And this happened back in August. So, oh no, I hope that it's not an issue. Okay. Yes, and people are talking about kind of bipolar and PTSD, and postmodern saying, yeah, mania is not a symptom of PTSD. Although I would agree, although it might feel to the person like mania. If they're not familiar with what mania like really kind of looks like. Like there might be moments where you're feeling really good. Like I can handle this, I can handle life, I'm doing good. And you're feeling fairly normal. And then these deep depressive episodes of like, I can't handle this. And it might just be like that one thing, like you come across a person, you hear a song on the radio, you come across a person that has the same name as the abusive person in your life, and you're back to square one again. So all of these mixes of emotions are also very, very normal. It's sort of like the whole stages of grief. That's a big part of it. There's denial and acceptance and anger and bargaining and all of that. And I think PTSD really has its own set of emotions that a person has to work through in order, before they really get that level, before they get all this resolved emotionally. Ooh, that's a good one. Abuse Free says, hey, Dana, please talk about how to deal with people who deflate a topic with saying you are too sensitive when you are talking about some issue with them. Oh, that makes me nuts. That's such a minimizing thing for other people to say. And I really don't think that there is such a thing as too sensitive. Like it's something either bothers a person or it doesn't, right? And everybody's got their own line with that. So what might not be a big issue to us or to them, if it's a big issue to the other person, then that's all that matters. And sort of like if somebody's joking and you don't find it funny, if somebody was teasing me about my weight and I didn't find that funny, then it's not me being too sensitive. It's like, that's just not funny for me. And everybody's got their own line with funny. I mean, some people tell really off-color jokes and they think it's hilarious. And other people might find off-color jokes really hilarious. But if you don't find them off-color jokes hilarious, that doesn't mean that you don't have a good sense of humor. It just means you don't find those kind of jokes funny. And so I really make it a point to correct people. So if they tell me, oh, you're just being too sensitive, I would just say, you know what? No, I'm not. Like, that bothers me. You know, might not bother you, but it bothers me. So, especially if it's directed at you, like it's okay to speak up with stuff like that. Oh, that's a good idea. Karen is talking about selling a house and says, I found it really helpful to also write off a checkoff list when I sold my house. It broke it down into smaller tasks. Yes, I like that. And I think too, realizing, done is better than perfect. And it's, you just do the best that you can and you let the rest go. That's all any of us can do. So. Okay, let's see. There's River says, thank you, Dana, and everyone, about your comments about complex PTSD. It really helps. You're welcome. And, there's a great book out there that you might enjoy if you are a reader. It's by Pete Walker, and it's called Complex PTSD From Surviving to Thriving. That book is chock full of so much information. It's really something. I just highly recommend it. He really talks about all the different ways that PTSD or complex PTSD is caused, the side effects, how to identify it within yourself, how to move forward after it. It's a really great book. Teresa says, I don't know how to deal with a narcissist cerebral pedophile. I'm crushed, shocked, and numb. Any videos or literature on the subject? Are you talking more like this person's more of a cerebral narcissist and they're a pedophile? I think that's what I'm getting from that. Um, I guess it depends on kind of what all is going on in the situation. I could imagine that you would be shocked and devastated and numb. I think that's all very normal, understandable, reasonable, healthy responses to somebody that's a pedophile. And especially if they've acted on those pedophilia type urges and have actually harmed a child. Um, I would say for the child, getting them in therapy right away and then filing charges against the pedophile as soon as you possibly can. And then therapy for you to try to process this. Renee asks, Dana, can you talk about what happens when a narcissist dates a narcissist? So this was something Angie and I were talking about the other day. I really view it as, okay, so for starters, when you have a narcissist who is, let's say, like really controlling, it tends to be only there tends to be only one controlling person in a relationship, right? It's sort of like there can't be too many cooks in the kitchen. In a relationship, in any relationship, there tends to be one person that's more kind of dominant than the other person. If they were both two very strong personality types, those relationships tend to either fizzle out very quickly. It's hard to have two very strong personalities in a relationship. When you're talking about narcissists, something to that extreme, um, it can happen. I mean, you can have two narcissists together, two sociopaths or two psychopaths or what have you together. I really look at that as it's sort of like a basket full of snakes. Ooh, my light just went out. A basket full of snakes. You might have an anaconda and a black mamba and a rattlesnake. And so there's this poisonousness going on in this basket. And it's like, who's going to win is kind of a crapshoot. It just really depends on what's going on between the snakes in the basket. So, you know, it doesn't tend to end well. I mean, they tend to be really high conflict, incredibly dramatic relationships full of a lot of, abuse and exploitation. It's chaos. It's chaos. Yeah, Healthy Love says my ex-husband who's a narcissist is married to a borderline personality disordered woman, and his mother is narcissistic too. Their dynamic is crazy, crazy, total basket full of crazy snakes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just you know, the thing. I would just steer clear of a situation like that. There was a gal, I think it was in one of the support groups the other day, who was talking about, or maybe it was in the chat, a fiance whose ex is a narcissist, and she's manipulative and she's turned these kids against her, and it's just all of this drama and dysfunction in their house. And I'm a really big fan of, whenever we date somebody, it's really important to also look at their inner circle, because that's what's going to be in your life. And I think it's important too, if we have children, you've really got to be really, really picky and particular and have healthy standards for what you have in your child's life. So we might really love this person and be dating them, but if they come with all kinds, if their ex is a narcissist and drama and dysfunction and dangerous and manipulating children, and that's not something that, in my opinion, is healthy or appropriate for our children to be in. And so for that reason, I would just say, you know what, this person's awesome, but I can't have a relationship with them. Maybe this is something that we could revisit after the kids are grown and gone, to try to have a relationship. But to get tangled up in all of that, it's going to sink you too. So even if the person that we're dating or whatever, they might be fine, but if they've got other people, if their mother, that's another example, if they have a parent who's narcissistic and controlling and manipulative and abusive, if she's or mother or father, if they're an active part in their life, and your partner can't set boundaries, can't say no, is taking action out of like fear, obligation, and guilt, that's going to be your life too. And realistically, it's probably going to ruin your marriage, and it's probably going to ruin your children. And so to 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 take protective action as much as possible to limit the effects of toxic people, you know. Uh excuse me. So Debbie says, when abusers don't, I'm going to insert the word always. It says abusers don't know that they are abusing. It can be very confusing. Depending on how they were raised and like what they're used to, how they're acting might be totally normal for them. So it might not register as abusive. I think with people in general, we all, right? Like we all have different degrees of self-awareness of our behavior and how we come across and all of that. Just like we were talking about earlier, some people, I would say even my younger self, with how I used to joke and stuff. My brother and I have very much the same sense of humor. My mom does not. And my brother and I would joke. And we have kind of an off color sense of humor. So we would joke and joke and joke. And my mom was like, I don't find that funny. That would get us riled up even more, because it was so funny to us that it wasn't funny to her. And I'm sure we were like, oh, you're too sensitive. We would totally minimize that, whereas me nowadays, with a better degree of self-awareness, I know now, okay, I cannot joke with my mother the same way I joke with my brother. It's, my goal now isn't, I'm not 15 anymore. And so my goal isn't to I don't know. I just have a different level of self-awareness, right? So I think sometimes abusive people can be that same way where they're just not aware of their behavior and they just don't see past themselves and they don't see past their worldview. And it's sort of like, well, I think it's funny, therefore you should think it's funny. Or I, you know, it, it's that same kind of mindset of like, well, and it's also very much a teenage mindset too of like, well, no, you made me do that, or everything is every issue is everybody else's fault. But the problem with abusive people is like they don't grow out of that. Like they don't understand, no, it's not all about you. And it's like, your actions matter. And this is how we get along in society. But that's the thing too. Even it doesn't matter if they understand or if they don't understand. It's what's more important is that we set boundaries and have a understanding of our standards of how we expect to be treated. And so if other people that are in our lives, they either meet that standard or they're gone, and we can try setting boundaries with them. So like for again, like that example with me and my mom, if I were to still do that with her today, right? If I were to still just badger her with a bunch of jokes that she didn't find funny, I would expect her, and she would she'd probably call me out on it once. She'd probably remind me a total of twice, and then be like, you know what, we're done here. Like I'm calling, like, I'm not coming to visit anymore, or I need to leave the restaurant, or this isn't funny. Like, she would shut that down. So I think that's what we can do. So if somebody is continuing to treat us in a way that we're not okay with it, if we address it, be assertive, depending on what it is. Like there's certain instant deal breakers I have. Like if somebody is treating me with contempt, disgust, or hostility, like if they're just, or maliciousness, that stuff is instant deal breakers. Like that's not how friends or family treat other people. That's not how people who like each other treat other people, but if it's boundary stuff, like, joking or, I don't know, I guess pretty much anything else, I will bring it up with that person once, and because nobody else knows where our boundaries are except for us. But if it continues to happen, then I'm really going to distance myself from that person. Or if that person shows that, if it becomes clear that we are just really not on the same page, their idea of how they live their life is very different from what I want in my life. I don't want to be somebody's parent. I don't want a project. I don't want to try to change them. They probably don't want to be changed, and they probably don't want a parent either. So at that point, I'm also going to just kind of back away and be like, you know what? We just don't click. Like this just isn't working. Okay. And Maura is going to bed. Says, good night, everyone. Nice to stop in for the chat. It was nice to see you. So take care. And Ren, yes, actually I do. Okay, Ren asks, Dana, I know you are super busy and have a ton of comments to read. I just have one question. Do you have a P.O. box? I made a cute card and I would love to send it out of appreciation for all you do. I would love that. So yes, I do have a P.O. box. It is Dana Morningstar, P.O. Box 464. And it's Mason, Michigan, Mason, Michigan 48854. So, and I actually just got a letter in the mail the other day from a gal, and I left it at my friend's house, but it just totally made my day. It was the nicest letter, and I haven't gotten a letter from a person in a very long time. And so it was just really, it's just so cool to connect with people from all over, and for somebody, because we're all busy, right? And for somebody to actually sit down and take the time to write a letter and mail it just really meant a lot to me. So I'll mention her name when I get the letter next week, when I go over there and get all the stuff I left over there. Okay, let's see. Adela, it says, hey, Dana, if somebody ghosts you, how do you know if they've just been setting a boundary, or if it was carelessness and indifference or a lack of empathy? or if they are a healthy person or a toxic one. You know, it helps a lot if we try to stop second guessing them and focus more on like what we want in our life. So if, because we don't know, right? Like who knows? Who knows if we crossed a line with them and they just weren't comfortable, or if they reconnected with their ex, or if they are just playing games or whatnot. And we can make ourselves nuts trying to figure out what exactly happened. So I would just kind of stop trying to figure it all out, which I know is easier said than done. I would just be like, you know what, regardless of whatever is going on with them, like that's not okay with me. And like, I don't need that in my life. And so I'm done. You know, if we can turn the focus onto us and like what we want and will allow in our life, that's when your life really begins to change. I think a big reason that so many of us tend to get tangled up with these pathological people is we continue to try to figure them out. And instead of being more in tune with our boundaries and standards and deal breakers, we, you know, we're trying to figure them out, and then they might come back and then they give us excuses, or and they might even be legit, right? Like, or they come back and they kind of, all of a sudden they're back in our lives and we're like, okay, everything's fine. And then they leave again, or something else happens or what have you. And again, maybe they're just really busy, maybe who knows. But if it's not working for you, then it's not working for you. And like that's all that matters at the end of the day. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. I think too, when you can put the focus on you, it really does help to let all that stuff go, and it'll help you to move forward, because so many people do get caught up in that. Well, what if I am to blame? And what if I did share a part in this? And what if they're not a narcissist? And well, what if, and what if, and what if, and what if? And, you know, like it just, and it might seem really trite to just say it doesn't matter, but it's the truth. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If this was a toxic situation for you, that's that's the only reality that you have. That's the only answers that we have. And that's really the only place that you can take action from, is realizing, okay, does this work for me or not? You know, I'm sure, like many people, right? You've probably had a handful of situations in your life, like somebody was talking about earlier about a work situation, or in these problematic situations, or with family, or with a neighbor, or with friends, or a significant other, where if we're continually doubting ourselves and our perception of the situation, and if we're continually caught in that introspection, is it me? Is it them? What's going on? Do I have a problem? Do they have a problem? I don't know. And is this a legit problem, or how big of a problem? And I guess nobody's perfect. And, should I forgive? And, but now they came back and everything seems fine again, but this isn't working for me. And I'm confused because they said one thing, but now they're doing another. And but maybe I have issues because of my past, and like all of that. I have found one of the biggest gifts like I've been able to give myself in the past year or so was the realization of, I don't, like, tightening up my boundaries to the point where I'm like, you know what? I don't do any type of situation, work, friends, family, significant others, that are perpetually confusing and that cause mental anguish. The huge, like, total game changer. Whereas before, I would stay in mental confusion and perpetual or mental anguish and perpetual confusion, thinking that wasn't a reason enough to leave. That I really needed that concrete proof that yes, indeed, they were toxic and that they were being malicious. And I would stay and stay and stay until they proved me right. And then I would leave. And by that, and why? Like at that point, there was so much hurt and heartache and damage, but I felt too judgmental leaving sooner. And when I kind of realized, that compassion, and I was coming from a good place. I don't feel like I was coming from like a place of like a weird, like attachment disorder kind of place or like an ingratiation kind of place. I really felt like I was coming from a place of just compassion. Like, I get it. People make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. I do too. I mean, but I realized that I think it was the Dalai Lama had said, our compassion is not complete unless it includes ourselves. And when I realized that of, oh my gosh, I've been putting myself in the back burner for so long of everybody else, I was giving everybody else like multiple chances, even if the situation wasn't working for me, because I was being so understanding, but I was losing myself in the process. And I was being in all of these like toxic situations in the process. And just realizing, yeah, you can not do that. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't make you less compassionate. It just means that you're making yourself a priority. Yeah, Renee says, Dana, this is so true. I remember wishing he would hit me so I actually had proof. And I've heard that multiple times from people, even women in the domestic violence shelter where I used to work, that were like, I wish it was worse. I feel like I'm being petty. He's threatened to kill me, or she's threatened to kill me, and they've pulled a knife on me, and they kind of tried to run me off the road, and they pushed me and they've pinched me and they've hit me. I mean, but I hit back. So like, it wasn't 100% their fault. And there's most people who are in an abusive relationship, especially if it's not physical, have a hard time identifying it as abuse until it gets really, really severe that they can no longer hang on, and then they leave. And even then, they oftentimes don't identify it as abuse. And even when there is physical violence involved, this is why people continue to justify their mistreatment. It's like, well, but I did forget to buy cat food, and that's why she was yelling at me. Because I mean, there's always some sort of like kernel of truth. Not always, but generally there's some sort of kernel of truth to it. Like, well, I cut my hair, and I knew he didn't like girls with short hair, but I just was tired of it. And so then he beat me up. But I guess I kind of had it coming, because I knew he didn't like that. We're rationalizing things that shouldn't be rationalized. But this is because if we're not grounded in ourselves, and if we don't have a healthy understanding of what we allow or not allow, like when things become a problem. And again, this stuff, it happens so gradually over time, and it is easy to justify and rationalize away, because you're not rational. It's like the Holocaust didn't start with the gas chambers, right? Like problematic situations don't start off like being really extreme. It starts off slow and subtle, and people kind of get pulled down this path, and the next thing they know, like it's this point of like craziness where and then people wake up. I mean, even still, like back with the Holocaust, when these Nazi soldiers were on trial, and they were like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I got here. And this isn't me, And so many of them were just horrified by what they had done. It's amazing how far we can get pulled off track if we're not grounded in ourselves. And most people aren't grounded in themselves. Like the stuff, like I always say, this stuff is really not taught, and it needs to be taught at a young age, because you can really get a very persuasive, charismatic person. And there's nothing in and of itself that's wrong with being persuasive or charismatic. But if they have some crazy ideology that they're holding as truth, they can persuade people to start believing and acting in really dangerous ways. Okay, let me scroll up here and see what's going on. That's a good question, Kiara. It says, hey, Dana, what's the difference between the inner critic and my abuser's voice? I constantly hear my abuser's voice, and it sounds different to my inner critic. It doesn't sound like me. How do I deal? That's a very common thing too. So it's cool that you can identify that this isn't like your normal inner critic voice. We all have an inner critic. I think really, frankly, I think it's part of the way that human beings that we're designed, because our brain's job is to keep us safe. But it's takes us to a point of it can really get in our way of trying new things, because in our brain's way of thinking, like that change, we're not wired for change. We're wired for what's safe, and what's safe is what we know. And so we're all kind of wired to do what we know, because we're wired for that homeostasis, that level of kind of consistency in our life. And if we start taking steps to get outside of our comfort zone, because that's the thing too. So there's these two pulling forces on each of us. So there's this pulling force, and Tony Robbins talks about this. He's fantastic too. If you've ever listened or never listened to him, I highly recommend him. But he talks about how we're really wired for both growth and consistency. And so there are these pulling forces, because life is all about growth. And so we get bored if things are become too routine and we need to do something different. So our inner critic voice is often that voice that'll try to talk us out of doing something else. It'll try to talk you out of trying new things, or quitting your job, or leaving a toxic relationship or a friendship, or it might get down on you about maybe things that you've done, things that deep down inside we know are a problem, but that we don't want to admit. So our inner critic might nag us about our weight, or our house is messy, or it's oftentimes referred to as like the critical parent kind of voice. But I don't necessarily think that voice is all bad. It's kind of just that internal, it's more of like our deep subconscious that knows, that I think that knows us very well. But we can work towards overriding that voice by first learning to pay attention to it, realize that it's there, that everybody has it, and then trying to befriend it as much as possible. So, if like, for example, if my inner critic is criticizing me about my weight, or my books, or my writing, which is an ongoing thing. I think any person that's a writer or creative in general tends to have that inner critic voice where it's like never enough, or it's just difficult. Like you see everything, you see all of the areas that you need to improve on, kind of thing. And so for me, like I will acknowledge that and just be like, okay, yeah, you know what? There's some validity in this. But I'm working on it. And and I try to remind myself of like everything that I'm doing right and all of the steps that I have taken, and to just kind of counteract that kind of inner critic kind of voice. If it's really negative, because sometimes it is, where it's just insulting me, then I'll say, hey, you know what? Knock it off. And I'll talk to it like I would any other critical person. Like I don't need that. That's not helpful. So like, and then I'll repeat back to myself, you know what? You've come a long way. You've done a lot. Let's go back. You've written 2,000 words today, and you edited another 1,000, and you're doing a great job. And okay, with your weight, like you got a salad for dinner, and you're you could get more on the schedule for the gym, but like you're doing a lot of things right with taking care of yourself. So just reminding yourself of everything that you're doing right, I guess is what I'm saying. So now the abuser's voice can also be in there, right? And so it might be all of the criticisms and the insults and the put downs that they had said to you. And with that kind of stuff, I would just I would try to really realize, okay, this is just flat out garbage. This was another person who has a very unhealthy, damaged, fragmented ego, that the only way that they know how to make themselves feel good is by tearing everybody else down. So like really don't listen to anything that they have to say, because it was not ever coming from a place of anything other than them being weak and insecure and fragmented themselves. So if that voice comes up, I would just say, hey, you know what? That's not that's not true and that's not needed and it's not helpful. Knock it off or zip it, you know, and start really focusing on like replacing instead of just being like, you know, if that abusive voice is like, oh, you're so stupid and fat and ugly and, you know, really kind of raining down on you all of these insults to stop it and be like, okay, you know what? Like, I don't need that. Just zip it. You know, you're so full of it. And then reaffirming to yourself, you know what? But you do a lot of things right. And this is what you have. Like, you know, like this is everything that's right about you. And trying to replace that self-talk with something that's more empowering. Um, Healthy Love says, I still feel stupid most of the time, but I won't live my life based on that feeling. I'm just aware of it and I can love myself in spite of that voice. Yes, totally. And I think there's a lot of people that walk around, it's that whole imposter syndrome, like where we just feel like everybody else has everything figured out except us, and that we don't know enough, that we're not good enough, that we need some sort of validation or permission from other people, that we need something else. Like we just need something else and then we'll feel like we're enough. And that's such a common feeling. And, you know, I'm in this writers group and I'm so outrageously thankful for it because, you know, it's a bunch of other people from all over the world at all different stages in their writing career. And what's so cool about that is people talk about this kind of stuff. And most people don't talk about self doubt and they don't talk about that inner critic and the struggle with it. And there's actually a fantastic book, so this called The War of Art. And in that book, I think it's Michael Pressfield, he talks about resistance. And whenever a person is trying, whenever we're trying to get out of that comfort zone and to really put ourselves out there, we're going to encounter resistance. And how to move past that resistance. It's just very interesting. So, you know, being in this group and it's also interesting when new writers come into it, you know, because of course they don't know our conversations that we've had previously, but they'll oftentimes, you know, after a few months, kind of sheepishly ask the group, like, man, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm really scared to publish my book. Or, you know, I feel like I need to join some more writers groups, or I need maybe like another editor, or I need this other stuff. And I just feel like I'm not good enough. Um, and I think too, this is why many creative people struggle with drugs and alcohol, because it really is, especially like in putting yourself out there like that, it's very difficult. And the good one, like the successful ones, make it look so effortless, and it's not. And so the point of all that is, I think, to realize that everybody struggles with this kind of stuff to some degree. And the more that we can kind of lean into that and embrace it. So here was my analogy that I told my writers group over the weekend, because I'm like, okay, I'm really going to hit this one book hard. I'm working on my next book, which is which should have been my first book, but it was The Red Flags of the Narcissist. And I've been working on this book on and off for 2 years. I don't know why I've had such a difficult time with it, but I have. So um, I told my writers group, you know, okay, I'm going to have a cage match with myself this weekend. Like I'm going to really just barrel through I really want to get a decent edit done of about the first 40,000 words. And then I realized um, that I didn't want like I don't want to have that relationship with my writing where I view it as a cage match. I want to view it as something that's enjoyable and fun and expressive and rewarding. And so then I realized, okay, I'm not in a cage match with my writing. I'm in a cage match with that resistance that surfaces. And that I need to develop some ways to get around that resistance because it can knock you on your tush. And so I do writing sprints. I set a timer and I write my little tail off for 15 minutes at a stretch. And I do that. I mean, I did that all Saturday and Sunday. I will take breaks. I have this new app, this Duolingo app on my phone. I'm trying to learn Spanish. And so then I'll take a break and I'll go do that and just do something totally, get my brain something totally different to do. I realize that when I'm in writing mode, I need to sleep a lot more. I need to take vitamins and I need to take better care of myself. And so kind of realizing how resistance feels and then figuring out a way to kind of dance with it is probably a better analogy than even doing a cage match. Like it's going to be there and you're going to have to learn how to dance with it because it's there. Everybody experiences it. And then I also kind of realized with my writing how I wanted to view it instead of, because man, I tell you, and I'm only mentioning this because I think that it can pertain to you guys in other ways. So, but this task, whatever the task you might be facing might be. So for me, it's writing, actually finishing a book, but for you, it might be selling your house or, actually filing for divorce or what have you. Knowing, having this kind of monumental task in front of you, but knowing that it'll be really rewarding when it's done, but getting through it's going to be incredibly stressful. I really started to view my writing as, okay, it's more like surfing. So it's not a cage match. It's, that's more the resistance part. But even then, I want the resistance part to feel more like dancing. The writing part, I want it to feel more like surfing. So there's going to be times where you put your head down and you paddle. And then there's times where you stand on the surfboard and you just ride that wave. And man, it's so rewarding. And it's just, that's the flow. That's the flow. Like you just catch that flow. And just like with getting your house ready for the market, you set the timer and you just kind of get into this flow mode and you try to make it as enjoyable as possible. So like with getting the house ready for the market, even though it might be incredibly stressful and a difficult and maybe probably a very emotional event, there's things that you can do to make it as enjoyable as possible. So you can create a playlist of music that is really energetic, that's really enjoyable, that'll get you moving, that'll keep you in a positive mindset where you're like, okay, I'm embracing this next chapter in my life. Like this is a good thing. This is going to be a positive thing. I can do this. I'm ready for this. This is the right thing. This is the next step. This is the next chapter in this book that is my life. I can do this. I got this. So really psyching yourself up for it, having music that goes along with it, having your favorite non-alcoholic drink. So if it's, root beer or tea or whatever, like kind of giving yourself these little treats throughout the day. Maybe you're ordering pizza for lunch or you're treating yourself, whatever might be a treat for you. You're allowing yourself to go for a 2-mile walk afterwards or to veg out and watch an old movie or whatever it might be. So kind of keeping those rewards coming and realizing, okay, I'm going to get through this, but I don't have to just suffer through this. I hope all that makes sense. Ooh, that's another really great question and comment. Kiara says, Dana, I recently realized that there is a difference between healing and coping. I feel like I'm coping, but I'm not sure if I'm healing. Please help. That's a really fantastic comment. Healing and coping. My guess is that that there's definitely an intersection between the two. And my guess would also be, I'd have to really think about that some more. My guess would be that I think because there's such an emotional, it's such an emotional roller coaster through healing, kind of like we were talking about earlier with the stages of grief. A person goes through that denial and then anger and then bargaining and then, acceptance. There's just all these whole range of emotions. Healing is very much the same way. And so I would I would say that coping is probably part of that, where with that acceptance piece of it, and with that and I think numbness, and where a person just feels like they're just kind of hanging on, is very normal. Healing to me is when, okay, so trauma is like, whatever the trauma is, it's like a bomb going off in your life. Whether it was you were in an awful car accident, or you were abused, or you had the death of a loved one, a divorce, it's a bomb that goes off in your life. And so a big part of healing from that is going to involve taking all of these pieces and kind of rebuilding, like reintegrating everything into a cohesive whole. And when you're talking about emotional abuse, when that bomb goes off in your life, or psychological, or any type of abuse, when you're rebuilding your life, so much of that, it's, oh man, it involves the way that you view the world and the way that you think about things. And um, maybe even, like, this one gal selling her house, like where you live and your finances. And there's so many different pieces of this puzzle that need to now come back together again. And I don't know, actually I do know, there's never that time, there's no like line in the sand where like you're not healed and then boom, you are healed. Like it's not that black or white. It's very much shades of gray that tend to happen over time. And then you'll realize, you'll have these kind of moments where you're like, oh, wow, you know what? That one thing that used to really bother me doesn't bother me so much anymore. Or you might even find, man, that one thing that I really was so angry about and so devastated about actually ended up being one of the best things that happened to me. Sort of like the guy that mentioned earlier about getting fired from his job. So even so, like in that kind of a situation where he might have a lot, understandably so, have a lot of anger and intense feelings around being fired, but then down the road might really embrace that and be like, man, thank goodness I was fired from that job. Like it allowed me to move forward and get this other job that I really enjoy, or I feel like I can breathe again. I cannot believe I stayed in that environment for as long as I did. So um so I think healing from narcissistic abuse involves quite a few things, a lot of things. It tends to involve, I mean, it changes how we see the world, how we see other people, how we see ourselves. Um, our understanding of, I think, our standards and our boundaries and our deal breakers, and how we trust other people or don't trust other people, struggling with trusting ourselves, all kinds of things. I mean, I would probably, maybe I should like take the time to just list out like all the different ways that a person tends to feel changed by this. So each piece will kind of click back into place over time, but um, I wouldn't necessarily stress. Here's where I would spend your energy if I were you, is I would focus on building up a life that you love. That is the upside of having a bomb go off in your life, and there's all of this rubble around you, like financially, physically, emotionally, like spiritually, like in every way, shape, or form. Everything, your life is just blown apart. The upside is now that you get to consciously make the decision of which pieces you're going to rebuild your life with. And that's incredibly powerful. There's and in many ways, and I don't mean to minimize what anybody's going through, in many ways it can be this incredible gift. Feeling like it's a gift tends to happen, a handful of years out. But because it's during that reconstruction time, it's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of hard feelings, a lot of intense feelings, and a person doesn't doesn't feel like there's any gift in this whatsoever. But if you keep focusing on rebuilding a life that you love, I think it can help a person get through a lot of that pain a lot sooner, because you're putting your pain to work and you're giving your pain a purpose, and you're consciously making the decision to have kind of that growth mindset of, you know what, I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to use this for my highest and greatest good. I'm not going to let this ruin my life. Like, I'm not going to let this end my life. I'm not going to let this ruin my life. I'm going to use this for the highest and my highest and greatest good. And I'm going to use it for the highest and greatest good of others. And what I mean by that is, maybe then you decide, you know what, I had this awful person in my life. So I am going to use that, how selfish and horrible they were, and I'm going to use that to make me be a better mother, or just more caring to other people in general. You start to reclaim that in like little ways. It's not these big moments. It's, making a concerted effort to tell your child that you love them more often, or holding a door open for a stranger, or um, sometimes even if you're in the line at the Starbucks or at a drive-through, buying the car behind you um, lunch, stuff like that, where it's just this, it kind of helps a person feel more in control, and it just spreads some more positivity and good energy when you're in a very dark place. So I hope that that helps. Okay. Oh, I like that. Susan says, I find writing out the positive traits of me and the negative traits of who I was when I was with him during and after helps me to reflect that I am authentic and that I am much better on my own. Yes, absolutely. I think if you are, uh, and if we're ever in a situation that's, I think if you view it as like the difference between toxic and nourishing, toxic situation makes a person feel like they're being poisoned. Like, there's major physical changes that happen. They feel like they're 110 years old. They're exhausted. They feel sick. They feel ground down. They feel like they're being poisoned. And a nourishing situation is, it brings you energy. There's joy. There's vibrance. You feel healthy. You're just, you kind of got a little pep in your step. It's a very different place. And so anybody, once we can get more in tune with how we feel either way, things that really nourish us, things that really drain us, and to start spending more time into those areas, those people, those places, those things that nourish us, that's the zone. There's no need to be around people that are trying to sink you, or that you're wearing yourself out trying to get them to swim. Just finding what's nourishing, and it's just so much more enjoyable. XOK says, is talking to Manju and says, yes, you are on the right path and continuing to eliminate all narkish people in your life forever. Yes, that's a huge thing. And that, I think that's part of a major stage in healing and understanding of all of this, is people tend to show up here on my channel or other channels like this. They're looking for information about one relationship that they've had with their mother, with their ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or husband or wife or whoever it is. There's that one relationship that brings them to start trying to figure out what on earth is going on, because they know that what they've experienced is so outside the realm of normal and so incredibly painful, that they're like, I don't feel like I just went through a bad breakup, but I don't know what's going on. But these terms like narcissist and sociopath or psychopath really kind of fit like what happened to me. And so then they're in here for a while, and then they start realizing, oh my gosh, you know what? My boss was a lot like that too. She was really something else. Like, she was an awful, horrible, wicked witch of a woman. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I had a best friend in high school, And I used to joke that that relationship is a lot like an abusive relationship too, but I never really thought that it was because we were just friends. And then, and then they start having these realizations and it's just this kind of like ripple effect of like boom, 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 like these rings of awareness start happening. And I'm like, man, okay, actually, I've had quite a few of these people in my life, but I always justified it and glossed over it. And I thought it was me and that I was too sensitive or making too big of a deal out of things, or that I was the problem, or that I was difficult. And now they start seeing this. And so when a person's waking up to this, it's very common for them to really doubt themselves. And they're like, I'm seeing red flags in people everywhere. I'm seeing all of these narcissists in my life. And am I making too big of a deal out of things, or is this really happening? And what's really happening is that you're just now becoming more aware of what problematic behavior looks like and what it feels like, and that it can come in a wide variety of packages, that it's not just your ex-husband and it's not just your mother, that it can be any gender, any age, any nationality, any religion, any profession, any relationship to you. So it's so important that we focus on that behavior and not just, oh, it's men or it's Scorpios or it's, attorneys or what have you, and see this behavior is pervasive. Like lots of people have it out there. And so it's important that we're aware of what problematic or abusive behavior looks like so we can steer clear of it. At the same time, it's also important that, so this is one of the challenges I've had with writing this in my video series too, the red flags of a narcissist, is when people are starting to wake up to this, very understandable, they tend to look for things that are concrete. They want to know, okay, what caused me pain? And they're thinking about it in very absolute terms of, okay, well, I met this guy on an online dating site. So, okay, from here on out, never going to use online dating sites again. And, he was older and he was a Scorpio and, he drove a BMW. So, and then it can, XXXXX, like they're just avoiding people that do all of these things because they're linking up incorrect cause and effect. There's a difference between like correlation and causation. And so those things are correlated, but they're not the cause of the pain. And so it's important to be able to identify that behavior. And then here's the thing too, is because that kind of stuff, it's a correlation, it's not a causation. When people are looking for signs like, okay, charming is a big sign of a sociopath or even, narcissist. So they might avoid charming people, but then they might think, and this has happened to me, this has happened to a lot of people, where they're like, okay, my ex was incredibly charming, so I'm going to avoid charming people. And then what do? Subconsciously or consciously, they might find themselves dating a more like overt jerk of a person because it's that weird sense of comfort of like, but at least I know what I'm dealing with. Whereas the charming person's the snake in the grass, the overt narcissist is the snake on the street. And so your brain is doing the best it can with the information that it has to try to keep you safe, but it still hasn't learned all of the correct lessons yet. And really the main takeaways, while all of these red flags are, pointers, they're pointers to kind of these patterns of behavior that problematic people tend to have. They're not absolutes. Every problematic person is an individual and they're going to come across in a wide variety of ways. And the biggest tool that any of us have in our toolkit is to pay attention to how you feel when something's off. This is very difficult for people when they've gone through abuse because everything feels off to them. I get it. I was there. Where you're like, I don't trust anybody. I feel like everybody's out to get me. And I don't know who's safe and who's not. And then they want to isolate and they become afraid and they want to venture out back into the world. They might, maybe they don't. If they do want to venture back out into the world, they're so terrified of getting hurt again. And but it's important. And then and if they come across another problematic person, then they start really doubting themselves. Like, is it me? Is it them? I mean, I know I have issues from my past. I mean, it could be me, and I don't want to lose out on a good person because I have issues. And how can I tell? I mean, they're doing these kind of weird things, but maybe that's not a big deal. And again, I get it. I've been there. I've been there a handful of times. And the biggest takeaway I can give you with that is to go with your gut instinct and to pay attention when something feels off. If something feels off, it's because it's off. And we don't have to try to second guess them or their intentions or their motivations, or are they a narcissist or are they not, or whatnot. If you're solid enough in yourself and you know where your standards and boundaries and deal breakers are, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what their intentions are. It matters like what's okay for you in your life. And it takes practice. It takes practice to not second guess yourself. I still struggle with it. And it takes practice. Here's an example. So last week, we had a guy, this was in the middle, well, actually like 2 weeks ago, this is when it started. We had a guy come over here at my boyfriend's house. We had a guy come to the front door, banging on the door, aggressively banging on the door. And my boyfriend answered the door. And the guy he was asking for money. He's like, hey, had this whole story about how he really needed money. He'd be willing to rake leaves or shovel or, I think at that time we still had shovel snow and do whatever he needed to do in order to get money. And my boyfriend said, hey man, like, no, I don't have anything for you. Good luck to you. Well, then the guy came back last week and I was home alone and he started aggressively knocking on the door. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I didn't know, and he saw me. He was able to look in the door and I was sitting at the dining room table. And, it was that whole moment of like, do I call the police? Like, what do I know I wasn't going to answer the door, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Totally panicked, is like, and everybody handles stressful situations like this differently. Right. So I tend to go into freeze mode in these types of situations. And so I go to the door and I'm talking to the guy through the door. I'm like, hey man, I don't have any money. This guy's not letting up. He's like, really becoming angry with me. Well, if you really cared, you could take that. You could probably got an ATM card. You could take your plastic. You could go to the bank. You could go to ATM and get money. I mean, you don't care what's, and blah, 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 on and on and on. And finally I was like, dude, I don't have any money. Like, good luck to you. I can't help you. And I had called my boyfriend and I'm, hysterical. I'm crying. I'm like, I don't know if I should call the police. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I knew that I should have called the police, but I was scared of overreacting, which I wasn't. And I was scared of making the situation worse. What if this guy gets really upset that I called the police and then he comes back and now he's out to get me? And, but there was this whole moment there where here I am second guessing, like, I don't know what to do. And should I call the police? Should I not call the police? Is he really being aggressive? Am I making too big of a deal out of nothing? Travis didn't seem to have a problem with this guy, 2 weeks ago. And is it me? Is it my PTSD? Like, what's going on? And then at the end of the day, it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It was not okay with me. And, he had no business being on the property. Right. So I was talking to a friend about it and I was telling her what happened and I was just really shook up over it. And my friend is really no nonsense. And she was just like, oh my God. Yeah. She's like, absolutely. She's like, I would have called. She's like, I would have told him, basically to get the hell off of my porch right away. And she's like, and I would have immediately called the police. And she's like, and this had happened to her before where the police had responded over a call and a situation years ago and the police were minimizing it. Like, well, ma'am, basically, and so she had said, if the police had gotten there and they had said, well, it's no big deal. And, he's just been going door to door. She said, that she would have told them, you know, it is a big deal. This is my property. He has no business being on my property. It's a big deal to me. I don't care how you feel about it. Like, you need to have this person off my property. And she was absolutely right. So it's just kind of interesting how we perceive things and handle things. So, but I will say that I am getting better with handling the freeze response. I did end up calling the police, and you know, I caught myself too, because I normally in the past have been very apologetic about asking for help, anybody for help, let alone the police. And I had called him and I said, you know, here's what's going on. This guy, you know, he's going down the street. He's aggressive. I'm concerned he's going to be back. I'm concerned he's going to kick in the door or show up in the middle of the night. I mean, it was, you know, so I guess handling that freeze response, it's like anything else. Like, it just takes practice. It takes practice having a different response to things than we normally have. Stainless says, I was binging on Forensic Files, and the same thing. The guy was looking for gas because he ran out. So he stopped at the first house he saw, and yep, he killed her. And then later found out that she was the wife of the sheriff. Wow. And, you know, I remember I went on a road trip with a friend of mine. This was years ago, before cell phones, before GPS, before anything. We were going on a road trip from Colorado to Texas. And so it was like a good, you know, 26-hour drive. Two girls, we were 16, 17 years old, and staying in a hotel, you know, it was a 2-day drive. And my mom had sat us both down and really went through, like, okay, what do you do if somebody knocks on your hotel room door and says, you know, I ran out of gas, I have a flat tire, can I come in and use your phone? And she ran through a bunch of these different scenarios. You know, what do you do if a car is following you and is creeping you out? What do you do if you know, she was very good about helping us to think things through ahead of time and to prepare ourselves. You know, the whole, you stop and you get gas when you have about half a tank. Like, don't wait until, because especially back then, this is 20 something years ago, like, you can drive for, you could run out of gas if, like, you don't fill up at the halfway point, because there just weren't that many gas stations between there. And, you know, so you know, you're not being overly cautious. And so now it's one of the things, like, when I go on a road trip, like, I always make sure I start off with a full tank of gas. I always make sure that I stop and fill up. Even if I have half a tank, when it hits the half a tank point, that's when I start looking for another gas station. So things like that, to err on the side of caution. If somebody does come banging on your hotel room door, to always look out. I had a situation. This is maybe 10 years ago. It was so creepy. I was with some friends. We were in Arizona, and we'd left this party because I wasn't feeling well. And I went back to my hotel room, and I had just shut the door and had started running the bath. I mean, I'd only been in there for like less than a minute. And somebody was knocking on the door, and but it was kind of an aggressive knock. And my initial reaction was, that's really weird. But then my second reaction was, oh, I bet it's one of my friends, because, like, they just dropped me off at the hotel room. And thankfully I looked through the people, and ended up being nobody was there. So, but that situation could have gone south really fast. It was just a very strange thing. So paying attention to how you feel and erring on the side of caution. So we can all rationalize this stuff on the fly. Just, you know, thinking, oh, that was probably just my friends. And it turns out it wasn't. I asked them about it later, and they're like, no, wait, it wasn't us. But we can rationalize these things at the time, but it doesn't hurt to err on the side of caution. So what if you look through the people at the door, or you ask somebody, hey, who is it? Or you just don't answer the door for people that you don't know. So what if you end up calling the police because you get freaked out? So what? You're safe, you know? Okay. And Kiara says, hey, Dana, I feel overwhelmed when I enter the world, and I often feel myself overworking and overexerting my energy to people please. I feel drained, and if I don't do it, I feel guilty. How do I stop? Well, I think maybe by realizing that the guilt that you have for not being a doormat, because that's what people pleasing is, it's being a doormat. The guilt that you have, there's different types of guilt. And there's appropriate, the two main ones I would say are appropriate and inappropriate. So appropriate guilt is you did something wrong and then you feel bad about it. You should feel guilty for that. Inappropriate, and that's a good driver of our behavior, right? Like there's guilt that lets us know that we've done something wrong. That's healthy guilt. It's appropriate guilt. It helps us to do better next time. Inappropriate guilt is guilt that we experience when we've done nothing wrong. And especially if we're asserting ourselves and kind of guarding our energy or our time. It takes practice for a person to, I think, understand, to get comfortable with saying no. It's difficult. Confrontation, I think, for most of us is difficult. So it takes practice saying no, and it takes practice sitting with those uncomfortable feelings of feeling guilt and still doing what you know that you need to do. There does tend to come a time where it gets easier and easier, and then those feelings of inappropriate guilt are no longer there. But I think making the shift and understanding that your wants and needs and time and energy and emotions matter just as much as anybody else's. And so I think maybe practicing anticipation is our biggest tool in our toolkit. So if you can prepare yourself ahead of time. So let's say, for example, you have a neighbor who continually asks you to watch her kids, and you're like, I feel bad if I say no, but I am, I'm exhausted when I say yes. So really getting clear with yourself of like, where is my boundary with this? Am I okay? Am I truly not like in a people pleasing way, but like, am I okay with watching her kids for like an hour and a half? Am I okay with watching her kids for half an hour? Or I don't really want to watch them at all? Like figuring out, what do you really want? And then coming up with responses. So if you decide, you know what, I really don't want to watch these kids at all. Like I'm tired and I've got my own stuff going on and it's just too much and she's not paying me anyhow. It's just weird. It's just, I'm over giving to the situation here. To anticipate, okay, what are you going to say next time she asks? So it can help by buying yourself some time. So next time she asks you, hey, can you watch my kids? To say something like, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Buying yourself time can help, especially if you're the kind of person that has that knee-jerk reaction or out of guilt, you just default into saying yes. It'll buy you some time to where you can, because when these requests come at us, and if we're not comfortable saying no, we feel knocked off balance. And so then we just default into yes. And so it's going to be breaking that pattern within yourself to where your default isn't volunteering yourself or just going with the flow or saying yes. So, I'm going to have to check my schedule and get back to you, or, hey, can I just get back to you on that? Or I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'll get back to you on that. Get some sort of default answer that'll buy you some time. Then you can formulate a way to say no. So then you can go back to her and say something like, I've just been incredibly tired lately. I can't. So I hope you can find someone. And then prepare, if she says, oh, but really for like an hour, I mean, it's no big deal. And she continues to argue that point, to have another answer of, no, I really can't. Like, absolutely exhausted. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I wish I could help, but I can't. And then to continue to hold your boundary. So I will tell you though, it's like anything else. It's sort of like the whole kind of two wolves situation. You know, which wolf is going to win? Is it going to be the people pleasing, or is it going to be the, the what is it, like the people pleasing, or is it going to be you, or is it going to be them? Is it going to be their wants and needs that win, or is it going to be yours? And it tends to be people in general, we tend to be driven the most by pain. If a situation continues to cause us pain, like you're saying, you're like, I'm exhausted, I'm worn out, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, if my life's not working, I'm tired of feeling this way. That's a really great driver and a great signal for us to realize we need to do something different. Like this is not how we're supposed to be feeling in our life and with our friends and whatnot. So it's time that we start figuring out ways to get ourselves back into alignment to where we're not feeling exhausted and all of this. Truth Seeker says, yeah, it's a huge moment in healing to realize that there's a difference between the two types of guilt. Yeah. Another, I think a huge aha moment for me too was realizing that like love and trauma bonding have a lot of the same chemicals at play. So just because, and I misread that for flipping decades. Like just because something feels really intense and it pulls you to them, and you're thinking about this person all the time, and there's like this level of like intensity and obsessiveness, and it, you know, just because all that's there doesn't mean that it's love. And to really think about, okay, well, like what is love? Like love is like when you truly love somebody, like there's that deep level of appreciation. And like when you think about, I think maybe it's helpful to think about loving a child. Like when you love a child, there's that deep level of appreciation of who they are, of them as an individual, and you love their uniqueness. You just enjoy them so much, and you want the best for them, and you want them to flourish and grow. And you just get so tickled that you get to see them bloom into a person, and it's just so fun. I think in a healthy relationship it's very much the same way, where true love is that deep level of appreciation for another human being. It doesn't involve abuse, it doesn't involve trauma. And to realize, okay, the same chemicals are often released during it. It's the intermittent reinforcement of these highs and these lows. And we tend to get all that confused for love. And it's so disturbing because it's a million miles away from love. And yet it's the dopamine and the oxytocin and the adrenaline and all of these, there's a lot of similar chemicals, but it's not the same. And so I think for me, breaking free from that, it's like it might feel like love, but it's not love. Same chemicals helped me to detach a lot quicker. Because when you're continually telling yourself, it causes this own level of mental anguish and confusion within us, if we're like, yes, but I really miss them, I really love them, I just love them so much. It's like, no, it's not love. Like, please, like, don't confuse that for love, because that's setting yourself up for pain, and it's disrespectful to love. They're not in the same zip code. Like, that's not love. You might have intense feelings that you're having a hard time getting over. Like, you feel like you're withdrawing from heroin, but that's not love. That's a trauma bond. Okay. Yeah, Postmodern says, and that's how I knew the last man I was with was lying when he said he loved me, because he mocked my goals and my growth and development. Yes, and good for you, because that's like everything good and right about you, right? Like you're trying to grow as a person. And somebody that loves you is going to nourish that and support you and encourage you and try to, enjoy the process of watching that happen, and not try to tease you or belittle you or, you know, sniff out or snuff out your flame like that. Healthy Love says, yes, I am finally not going for intensity. Something changed when I learned that last guy I was seeing was lying about being married. That made me get serious about my boundaries and instincts. Yeah, me too. That was it was such an eye opener for me. It was like, what am I missing here? Because now it's a pattern. And then it took me years. I did not see the bigger picture in that for a long time. I just saw that as, okay, I've got this unhealthy pattern that I could at least connect the dots with two guys. I mean, there was another guy that was definitely more of, I would say, like an overt psychopath that I dated when I was in high school. But that was, 20 years ago. And there hadn't really been anybody incredibly, I mean, there's been like not so great relationships, but nothing to like the extent of those three relationships. But they were so far apart, and they all came about in such different ways, that I wasn't connecting I just didn't see the thread between them all, and then when I really began examining, I think when I began waking up to realize that it was the behavior and that it wasn't just between two people in not a significant other relationship, that was a huge aha moment for me. Like, oh my God. Yeah, okay. I had a friend in high school who I used to joke about, this was an abusive relationship, and it totally was. Had she been a guy, had we been dating, I think people would have really pinpointed it. Other people saw it. I mean, it was really, it was just sick, really controlling, really awful, psycho, like single white female kind of craziness. And I just I didn't see it. Now I see it. Now I get it, but it took me a while. But yeah, then once you kind of realize, you're tuning into your intuition is huge, but then also tuning into what is nourishing and what is not nourishing for you. And learning to assert yourself and like all of this stuff is such a game changer. I mean, my God, I feel like most of my life has been lived on default and based on what other people felt I should do, or it's been based off of me making decisions out of being fearful and just thinking like, I feel like my whole life in large part has been like a plan B or a plan C. And there were brief flashes where I was doing things that I loved, but they were very short-lived for a wide variety of reasons. Either, I mean, like with my ex-husband, we were moving around. He was military. We were moving around like every 18 months. So I really felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Like no place was home. And I mean, talk about not having any sense of grounding. I mean, I really had nothing. And then after getting tangled up with Jack and then later on again with Steve, I was that whole proverbial jellyfish in the jar. Like I was morphing into whatever I needed to be in a relationship. And I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I really wanted. And one day I sat down and I started writing out a list of like where I wanted to live. I mean, I felt like I knew I was living in New Mexico at the time, and it's beautiful there. And there's a lot of things that are right about New Mexico, but I knew it wasn't for me. And so I started making out a list of like, well, what do I want? And I had this feeling of like, I think what I'm looking for is in Michigan. And I went on a road trip out here all over Michigan and then found where I live now. And I ended up moving out here. I love it. My mother, because there's no shortage of well-intended bad advice out there, had said, Dana, I really think you should rethink this. Like, nobody moves to the Midwest. Like, people move from there. They long gray days in the winter, it's harsh weather. And my mom is from Illinois, so she was like, and she just was, you know, thrilled to pieces to leave there. So she's like, how about Arizona? She's like, Arizona is really nice. There's more stuff to do. Like, you should really check out Arizona. So because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my own judgment or my perception of things. And I was at that point in my life, I was very easily swayed one way or the other. So we went on a road trip to Arizona, and I just was like, no, this is so not for me. It was so extreme. And I'd been to Arizona multiple times before, but I was like, this is just not what I'm looking for. And this is not for me. And there's a lot of things right about Arizona, but I'm like, this is just not my place. And, moved out to Michigan, and I love it. So it's just getting clear on, like, what are you looking for? Starting there, like, what does juice you? And not only like a relationship, but like in a place that you live, and a job that you have, and in friendships, and in hobbies, and like seeing the bigger picture of all of this. Stainless says, oh, come on, Dana. It's only got to -8 this year in Chicago. Yeah, I know. My first winter in Michigan was, I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 years ago. We had that big ice storm, and it was, I was so unprepared for it. It was awful, awful, awful. Oh my God. Um, I was without power. I forget how long. It was like 8 or 10 days. It was to the point where it was getting scary. And um, you could see your breath inside my apartment. It was so cold. I had every layer of clothing on. I had all the blankets on my bed. Um, oh, that was the worst Christmas of my life. That was really difficult, but I still love it out here. uh, let's see. Postmodern asks, where did you grow up? I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, although it never felt like home to me, which is so weird. And then my parents divorced when I was 13. And then when I think I had just turned 15, my mom and I moved to Colorado. And we moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, and I loved it there. I still love it there. It was so much more. I was like a fish to water. It was so much more my place. It was a much smaller town. There weren't highways. There weren't so many people. It was just had a much more. I don't know. It was just my kind of place. It still is my kind of place. And then I got married, and then we just lived. We lived in Wyoming, and I lived in Italy for a while, and then California, and then New Mexico, and then Las Vegas, and then back to New Mexico, and then a few other places in New Mexico because I was trying to sell some houses, and then to Michigan. So I think I don't know. I've moved a lot. And I remember back then, at that point in my life, there was one day where I just lost it, and I just started crying, and I'm like, I just want a garden. Like, I just want to have plants, and I just want to set down roots somewhere. Like, I'm tired of this. Tired of not being able to have house plants. I'm tired of not being able to just have a garden. So okay, let's see here. Truth Seeker says yes, Dana. Living on default. And that's going to happen if we're so used to being people pleasing and going with the flow, and kind of just getting pulled off course. And again, it's so easy to have that happen, whether it's well-intended bad advice or if it's just us not being certain in our decisions. If we're continually thinking that everybody else has it all figured out and that they have more insight and that they know better than us, and if we're continually doubting ourselves and our decisions and our perceptions of things and what we're capable of, we're going to continue to not follow our course because we don't have one, or we think we do have one. We're not in tune with the course that we have. We're getting pulled off center way too easily. And nowadays it's so cool because now that I'm more in alignment with all of these things, my thoughts and my feelings and my actions, and you know, understanding my own behavior so much more and kind of why I'm doing things, and really trying. Yeah, I think, I've mentioned this before, like my big thing nowadays is really having that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication with myself. So I try to have it with other people, but it's really difficult to have it with other people if you're not having it with yourself first. So that's a big, big, big thing because it's denial. I mean, it's a subconscious thing. Like, we're not aware that we're in denial. And so it's easy for a person to slip in and out of denial, but it's difficult. It's difficult to face a truth that we're trying to run from. Um, but really getting real with yourself and examining, I don't know, for me, like examining the results in your life, like whatever's kind of showing up in your life, it's there, like it's there due to decisions further upstream that we made. So if the results that we have today that are things that we don't like, we all live in lag time, right? Like today is there was the result of decisions in many ways, shape, and form, result of the decisions that I made a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago. And so if we want to change our future, we need to start by changing our today. But a lot of that starts with getting real with ourselves about like what's working and what's not working and why. Instead of thinking, like, one of my big things that I'm trying to break is uh, kind of lying to myself and telling myself like, oh, well, I'll do this tomorrow. And basically that, like, I'll do that tomorrow. And then I don't, and then I don't, and then I don't, and then I don't. And so now I'm trying to just get real with like why I'm not comfortable with doing it today, like whatever it is, and really getting real about it. So, okay, let me scroll up here. Yes. And Renee, that's a really great point. Renee says, one thing that changed after a toxic relationship was knowing that the perfect looking couples looked exactly like we did. So it doesn't bother me seeing them. Yes, I would agree. I feel the exact same way. Like, had anybody seen, even people that did see me and Jack and me and Steve would have been like, wow, you guys really make a really great couple. And so knowing that level of like, you just never know, like you never know, especially with social media. I mean, you're seeing that person's highlight reel. You're seeing a very scripted version of their reality. Or even if it's not scripted, sometimes it's all for show. I mean, some of the most abusive, dangerous, and destructive, like the Scott Petersons or the Bill Cosbys of the world, which is the kind that I tended to date, can make it seem like they're so, that they have this amazing relationship and with their family or their spouse or whatnot, but they're living this like horrific double life. And so yeah, you never know what people are going through. Okay. Postmodern says, yeah, Dana, you've really been all over the place. Oh, Wyoming. Did I mention I lived in Wyoming? I lived in Wyoming. Not much to mention about living in Wyoming. Crystal says, hey, Dana, I'm in Michigan. Where is Mason? I'm in the Detroit area. I am outside of Lansing. So what is that? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Detroit. There's actually there's a vegan soul food restaurant in Detroit that I've been wanting to go try. Maybe we should do like a meetup or something out in that area. I don't know. Detroit kind of stresses me out because of all the traffic. As you can tell, I don't like stress, and I really don't like traffic. But I will drive on some highways to go eat some vegan soul food. That'd be cool. Sable asked, hey, Dana, do you guys say use guys or y'all? Well, in Texas, we'd say y'all. And I still say y'all sometimes. I got teased for that so much when I moved to Colorado. My family in Illinois says use guys. I say you guys out here in Michigan. I was actually in my writers group. Another writer just called me out for that the other day. She's like, why do you say, it obviously bothered her a lot. Why do you say you guys? Why don't you just say you? I don't know. Sharon, why is anything? Whatever. But yeah, I say you guys all the time. Okay, very cool. Susan says, Dana, what I have done is decided where I belong, and that is back home. And so I've put a stick in the sand, and now I have to work out ways to get there. Another list. Yeah. But I think setting that intention is a really great start. It's a really, really great start. I remember doing so many vision boards about moving to Michigan, and it's so funny too. So when I made this road trip out here, I researched Michigan like you would not believe. I'd only been out here a few times. I'd never lived out in the Midwest. And I'd vacationed out here with a guy I dated back in college. And I fell in love with Michigan back then. And so on my road trip, when I was researching all these places on like City Data and other websites like that, I had an idea of where I thought I would want to live. And very quickly, when we came out here, I realized that was not it. And I was so bummed. I was like, oh my God, maybe my list of what I'm looking for really doesn't exist. Like maybe it's just a fantasy. And it was so crazy. So we ended up getting lost and stopping at this little place for lunch. And at that point, I was asking anybody and everybody. We'd stop for gas, we'd stop for food, we'd stop at the hotel, whatever. I was asking anybody and everybody, if you could live anywhere in Michigan, where would you want to live and why? And the only place that we went to on that entire road trip, that gal at this little cafe was the only person who said, you know what, I really like it right here, and everything that you're looking for is here. Like, maybe spend some time driving around today. And so we did. And my mom and I both just fell in love with it. Like, wow, this is it. This is it. I will say though, I do like Traverse City, but my reason I didn't move up there is the winters are really long and they're really harsh, and it's more of a touristy town. And I didn't want to do that again. I've lived like that twice now in really harsh, cold tourist towns, and not for me. But it's funny. Like, you just kind of know what places are for you. And Lilith says, Dana, come to Canada. I need to come to Canada because you guys are not that far away, and I need to update my passport so I can do that. I would love to visit Canada. I think Canada would also be another one of those places that I think would be my kind of place. Nikki says, I live in Nebraska. I win the most awful place to live. I want to move so badly. Yeah. I will tell you, when you decide, when you're like, okay, I need to move, come hell or high water, I need to move, you will make it happen. When I moved to Michigan, I had no money, like zero. I had I had no job. Um, it was just the pain of staying where I was so intense where I was like, I will figure it out. I don't even care. I had a tax refund coming, waited for that. And then I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. Sold a ton of stuff, left with a very small U-Haul and, um, and just towed my car and got out here. So you can make it happen. You really, really can. Okay, let me see. Okay, Kiara says, Dana, I have a narcissist for a mother, and because I'm in college and only 20, I feel like I can't heal. I keep having to deal with her abuse indirectly. Every time I make progress, she throws me off course. Help. Well, I would say this is a really great sign to start getting some distance. And if boundaries aren't helping, especially if boundaries aren't helping, if you're, and it's difficult when you're young, I get that. But so, can you move out? Can you get, I don't know, do you live on your own or do you still live at home? I don't know what your situation is. Start making steps to get out on your own. Um, to limit the time that you have around her and realize that you don't have to engage in any conversation that you don't want to. So, and it takes, and I get it. It's easier said than done, and it takes practice being assertive. And like we talked about earlier, practicing breaking that cycle of like her being domineering or controlling or asking too much or coming at you at a funny way, just slowing that down and just, if hey mom, can I get back to you on that? Or, you know what, I have a headache. Even if you have to lie, okay, for the time being, like just get yourself out of that situation, get some peace into your life. I don't feel good right now. I've got a headache. I need to go lay down. Um, I just finding excuses to distance yourself from her. So just to bring some more peace into your life is huge. And it's a big first step. And then once you get more comfortable over time, even just doing that, even breaking the pattern where she's not just sitting there yelling at you, or you're not bearing the brunt of whatever, or pulled into conversations you don't want to have. When you get more comfortable with asserting yourself, then you'll get to the place where you're like, you know what, mom, I don't want to have this conversation. We've had this conversation before. Or what I had to do with my own parents was, if something was happening in my life, if I was switching my college major, or if I was getting a different job, or if I was getting married or buying a car or whatever, I would just let them know, hey, I I'm doing this. Like basically, I'm switching my major, and even this is the thing, like even well-intended people can be like, oh well, but are you sure you want to do that? And you're almost done. And it's like, you don't need to rest, you don't need to sit there and defend your decisions. And so letting people know, like, oh, I appreciate your concern, but um I'm just letting you know, like it's already done. Like I'm just letting you know what I did. But I appreciate the concern, kind of thing. And just shutting that down. Like you don't need to engage with that kind of stuff. Crystal says, Dana, maybe you could help me start a meetup group for support. There's not much here for us. Man, there's not much anywhere for real, but meetup.com is a great place to start with that kind of stuff. I'd have to look and see what else is already going on, but yeah, I don't know. Let me think about it. It'd be fun to meet some people, but I have to say I do worry about, I've had some pretty scary situations online, and that kind of concerns me. But let me think about it. Yeah. Okay. So LP is talking about a manipulative person. He says, I was manipulated into wasting my hard earned money on her gambling. If I didn't do it, then the door would be slammed or I was given the silent treatment. Yeah. That kind of stuff is very common, especially if you're dealing with an addict of any kind, addict or an alcoholic. It's just that it's that oftentimes it's the addiction. It might also just be their personality as well, but oftentimes that addiction is they're so focused on like getting their fix that they lie, they cheat, they steal, they you know like do all manipulate guilt and blame and shame and do all of these things in order to push people into giving them their way. Like I'm pretty sure the people that were knocking on the door last week, I'm pretty sure that they were drug addicts, and that was the sense of urgency. So it's that level of persistence of hey lady, like if you really cared, like you could go to the ATM and get money and you could help us, and why don't you help us, like people like you, and really getting in my face about stuff. And you know like that's the thing, like other people can be so persuasive, and if we're not um it's hindsight's always 2020 too, you know but dealing with that kind of a personality, and just to be like, no. No, I see this a lot too on these shows like My 600-Pound Life. You've got this person who's obviously got an eating disorder, and they're addicted to food, and they are using, fear and guilt and obligation and all of these tools, shame and blame and pity and sympathy and all of these things to get their family members to bring them food. And even though the doctor's like, you're killing them, like they can't get out of bed, like you need to quit bringing them food. If you have a delivery service, bring Chinese food or pizza, like you need to just send it back. Like they can't have this stuff. And the person who's addicted to food is that's like they're addicted to it. It's like heroin. Like they're just this compulsiveness about it, and they just really can't stop. And it's like they just destroy everybody else in the process. It's sad. Addictions it's just so tragic. People are talking about the difference between y'all and you guys. Uh, Renee says, what's the plural of y'all? Well, technically, y'all is already plural because it's a stands for, it's a, what is the word? Conjunction? Is that the right word? It doesn't sound right. Between you all. So it's already plural. It's a good catch-all. Nice. Pertains to pretty much anybody, any ages, any genders. It's a good umbrella term for like people. Kiara is talking about setting boundaries with her mom and says, she would ruin my life if I did. She would go on a smear campaign. Kiara, there's a very real possibility that at some point in the near future that you will have to really figure out how much contact that you want to have with your mother. If she's this destructive to you and you're walking on this many eggshells and your life is not your own and she's so controlling and toxic, a lot of people do get to the point where they end up just going no contact with with a family member like that. And when a person does do that, you have to just kind of let the chips fall where they may. She probably is going to talk a lot of smack about you. She's probably going to make herself the victim of this story. She's probably going to have other people calling you crying, oh, you've got to talk to her. And, she's not getting any younger and she's your mother and family's forever. And you've got to prepare yourself. If you go that route, prepare yourself for all of that. And prepare yourself for people in your family not understanding. And then you need to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane. And the more confident that you can come to terms with that and just be like, you know what, I've cut contact off with my mom. or I refuse to see her. Maybe you write her a letter for birthdays and Christmas, whatever you decide. But if you did go full no contact, to just be like, you know what, this is why, like, she's been incredibly abusive and controlling, and um I'm tired of it, and I don't want to live like that anymore. And now that I'm an adult, I don't have to live like that anymore. And so if family members or friends or family friends or what have you do contact you and they do try to push you back, I would just say, you know what, you don't know her like I do. And she's made my life a living hell for a long time. And I don't want, this isn't up for discussion, you know? Like, I don't have contact with her because she's been hurtful to me, and I'm done and I'm over it. And then click, then you hang up. Like, you don't even need to have that much of a conversation. Like, you don't need to defend. There's a whole acronym: justify, argue, defend, or explain. You don't need to jade, is what it's called. Justify, argue, defend, or explain. You don't need to jade your boundaries with other people. This is your life. It's not a democracy. You don't have to explain things. But it's difficult when you've got an abusive person like that who's family, because other people, justify and rationalize and minimize their behavior. And but she had a bad childhood, and you're just being too harsh. And after all, she's your mother, and blah, blah, blah. So this is what really gets me. I was actually writing about this today in my Red Flags book, about how it just infuriates me to no end how people will hear. It's interesting and it infuriates me how people will hear about somebody else being in an abusive relationship, and they're like, well, why don't they just leave? And it's like, okay, part of it is most people don't realize that they're being abused. And B, most people around them also don't realize that they're being abused, unless it's pretty extreme stuff. Most people around them tend to justify and minimize and deny and deflect and blame, and including therapists and doctors and spiritual counselors and all kinds of people, because most people have this idea of what an abusive person is like and what an abusive relationship is. And most of the time they're wrong. And this is especially true when you're talking about families. Contraction. Thank you. Stainless says it's a contraction, not a conjunction. Yes, I knew that didn't sound right. Okay, let me see. Let me scroll up here. I had a friend of mine in college whose mother was incredibly manipulative and difficult and controlling and drama. And I would say her mother probably had like, I would say dependent personality disorder at a minimum, if I had to guess. And my poor friend, it was her and her older brother. And when their father finally divorced the mom became even like incredibly dependent upon them, to the point where she would get upset. She was upset when they went to college. And so my friend's brother ended up moving out of state. He went to school out of state and never returned. He was out of the house at 18. And my friend stayed and went to college and worked full time. But even though she was obviously very busy, her mother resented her and gave her continual guilt trips for not being home more and not taking care of her. And, oh, I've done so much for you, and this is how you repay me. And I needed you, and I need, and just all of this. And so my friend ended up really struggling with all of his guilt, and she was really angry at her brother for leaving, and kind of leaving her with this whole burden. And then she had to kind of work out the fact of like, you're in survival mode, like, you're not responsible for your mother. This is very twisted up and twisted around. She's an adult, you're an adult. She needs to handle it, and if she can't, then I guess she'll figure it out, or she won't, right? So my friend ended up finally moving across the country and just doing well, she started her PhD. This was years ago. I'm sure she's done with it by now, but like has started her PhD program across the country just to get away from it. But it caused her all kinds of emotional anguish to tear away from her mother. She really felt like she was leaving a child. Like, I can't leave my mother alone. Like, what, she's going to have nobody. She's difficult. She's demanding. She has no friends. Nobody likes her. Um, she doesn't know how to take care of herself. And she really felt like she was just leaving, a 6-year-old child to fend for themselves. It was really a difficult thing for her to do, but I would imagine that it's been one of the healthiest things to do. And frankly, one of the healthiest things that she could have done for their relationship. Because that's the thing. If we're having a relationship with another person that's based out of fear and obligation and guilt and all of that, that's building resentment. And so that's not a relationship, right? That's any relationship that's forged through guilt like that, it's never healthy. And so I think it's so important that we do follow our own star and realize, okay, and making, I guess, like getting clear with yourself, like if I don't do this, if I'm, not pursuing going to school or not pursuing a job I want or not getting married to the person I want because my mom doesn't agree with me and she's just controlling and difficult and demanding and all of this stuff, like you're losing yourself because of that, and you're going to end up resenting her. So it's uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable to be assertive with her, but it's also going to be really uncomfortable to completely lose yourself. And at the end, you're going to resent her so much that you're not going to want a relationship with her. So setting boundaries is always uncomfortable and difficult, but it's the only chance of getting things back on track, because they're not going to change and they're not going to do it. Okay. Yes, and Healthy Love says, and then you will feel bad because you're old and with kids and you have to start all over again. That's the thing. If we're not living our life for us, then you're continually restarting things. This also goes back to that whole emotional scale that I talk about all the time, finding your zone, like on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being ice cold, 5 being lukewarm, 10 being like that juices me, that excites me. My best days ever are like 10s, right? Things that really, really, that's the zone. If, we're not living, if we're continuing to live a life of default and settling for a life of crumbs, if we're living this life based off of shoulds of what our mom wants or, other people want or what have you, then we're living this life that maybe is somewhere on that emotional scale of between maybe like a 4 and a 6. And because it's not quite right, that's the word, frankly, that's kind of like the worst zone possible, because that's when people really live this life of mediocrity. But then they wake up one day and they're like, oh my God, I hate my life. Everything has been by default. My life has been a series of like plan B's or C's or D's. And I never really lived a life that I wanted to live because I never knew what that even meant. I would say that's more common than not. But again, this is one of the benefits of having your life blown to pieces, because nobody wants to start at square one and like redo all of this stuff. It's a lot. It's expensive and it's time consuming and it's emotional and it's stressful. And so in many ways, having this bomb go off in your life, it really can work tremendously in your favor, because you are consciously rebuilding your life with all of these pieces. And so you are figuring out, okay, and just the realization of, oh my God, I've been living this life in this zone of mediocrity between 4 and 6. And no wonder I keep maybe going back to school or getting a different degree or getting a different job or moving to a different place or dating different people. Like nothing feels quite right, but it's not necessarily, it's not them. It's us. It's within us of like, okay, if we're not grounded enough in ourselves, if we don't know what we want, then it's sort of like not having weather stripping around your door. Like if you don't have that, then a bunch of stuff's going to come into your house. Like if we don't have a solid sense of self, if we don't know what to keep in and what to let out, we're just going to get it's a mixed bag of what shows up in our life. Some of it's going to work, some of it's not, but there's not really any conscious planning with the direction that we're heading. And once you start realizing, okay, what is like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 for you, and you start living your life in that zone, things radically begin to change. Like your friendships change, your relationships with other people change, your jobs change, your health changes, your hobbies change, your habits change, everything starts changing because you understand what it feels like to live in that zone. Sable, thank you for the live stream donation. Says, I'm here just because it's the last day of February and the stock market recovered again. Yay. Well, good deal. I know it's hard to believe that today is the last day of February. Oh my God, where does the time go? It's really wild. Oh, you know what? Speaking of habit change, I'll share with you guys something. So I'm always experimenting with things, and to just kind of see my brain it's just so weird sometimes, and probably most people are like this in some way, shape, or form, but some things I never know what's going to really work for me. Like I might think that I know, but then I've found that I have to really stay open-minded to trying new things because I am continually amazed by different strategies or techniques or tips or approaches that I'm like, that will not work. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Why didn't I do this sooner? Kind of a thing. So one of the things that I'm now trying I'm trying to write on a more regular basis. And this has been a whole process from, I've written 2 books so far, but that was really in like fits and starts. Like that was not an organized process. And I really don't want to ever write books like that again. That was incredibly stressful. And it was the learning curve to all of it is what it was. The amount makes me want to cry. Like the amount of stuff, the work that I lost because I misplaced it. I didn't know how to get organized. I didn't know how to approach my writing. I didn't know how to pace myself. I didn't know how long a book was going to take. There were so many things. You start where you are. Like you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm in this writers group, and it's so interesting because people, talk about a wide variety of things, but they oftentimes will they share their successes and they share their frustrations. And so one of the things that people are doing is, trying for new authors, I should say, is trying to get in the habit of writing every day or writing 5 days a week. And so kind of thinking about a book and then backtracking it. So for example, if I have an idea of, okay, this book is probably going to wind up between 70 and 80,000 words. If I do 1,000, if I write 1,000 words a day, that's 30,000 words a month. So it would take me about 2.5 months in order to complete a rough draft of this book. And breaking it down like that, I'm like, okay, that's totally doable versus thinking like, okay, I've got to write 70,000 or, I'll probably finish a book between 70 and 80,000 words. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to do this calendar like a little kid, but with stars. And so I put a green star on every single day that I get my words in for that day. And of course, it makes it a lot easier to write. If I write, I don't know, I've been averaging probably closer to 2,000 words a day. But if I do my words a day, I do at least 500. 500 is my bare minimum. I'll do a day. Then I get my star. And then when I get a book published, I'm actually going to give myself a gold star and then like a little treat of some kind, like a massage or I don't know, something along those lines. So it helps the whole reason I'm saying this is it helps. Changing habits is never an easy thing to do. And we can also oftentimes forget that we're trying to actually change. And so sometimes thinking about, okay, like, well, what would work? How can I continue to remember that I'm trying to change, and that remember like what I'm trying to do in my life, and breaking it down and trying to make the process as fun as possible is a huge thing. So just, we all work on stuff like this. Thank you for that, Stanless. You're right. You're absolutely right. Stanless says, Dana, that's not like a little kid. Let's reframe that. People are visual, plain and simple. Yes, I like that. People are visual. I'm visual. I like see. I do need to see things, and then also at the top of the calendar, I have my goals for that month. So yeah, that's the plan. So then, and I have the next 3 months planned out, whether or not that will all come to pass is, I'm going to take steps to move in that direction. But there's, I think, allowing yourself to realize, like, if I'm doing something that's brand new, like, oh my God, like trying to turn these books into audiobooks has been so much more involved than I would have ever anticipated. And I keep hitting all these roadblocks. It's really, really frustrating. And so I really thought, okay, yeah, that'll take me, maybe like 4 days to do the audio and then like a day to edit. And it's not like, it's a lot. I'm probably going to have to see if I can hire somebody that can help me with figuring out the sound and why I can't get the levels the way that they need to be. So sometimes things take longer than you anticipate, and it is what it is. Stainless says, Dana, yes, let's talk about reframing. It's wonderful. Yeah. Reframing is wonderful. Self-talk is so powerful. It is such a powerful thing. And just like Stainless had said, here I am saying, even jokingly, like, oh, well, this is stuff that little kids do about my behavior. Even though I didn't mean that as a slam to myself, it is a slam to myself. And there's nothing wrong with being like, okay, this is how I keep track of stuff, and this is what's motivating me, and whatever, or like I'd mentioned earlier, how I was talking about, again, totally joking with my writing group about how I was going to have this cage match with myself over the weekend, and I was really going to work on this book. And then I realized, I'm like, I don't want to go to war with myself. Like, I want to write a book and I want to enjoy the process because this is my life. Like, I love writing. I have a love-hate relationship with writing because it's the struggle, it's the resistance of it all. And there's days where you will write. I would imagine it's like any other person that paints or does anything else. Like, you have days where you're in that flow and it's awesome. And you're like, oh, this is so cool. And man, where are these words coming from? This doesn't even feel like it's me. And it's just, you catch that wave and it's awesome. And then there's days where you're staring at a computer screen and you're like, I don't think, am I really a writer? Maybe I'm not. Like, maybe I'm just like all this self-doubt kicks in, and, which can very quickly spiral into like self-loathing and insecurities and thinking like, oh, who am I to be writing a book? And, just all kinds of negative. And those days are difficult when you have them. But, reframing it and being like, no, man, like, it's writing a book is like surfing, and some days you catch waves and some days you just do a lot of paddling. It's just all part of the process. But you got to get out there. You got to get out there and in the water. And you just sometimes, and let the day unfold how the day is going to unfold. Like so many other things. It's funny, many of the writers in my group will talk about their writing process and they'll ask the successful writers, what have you guys done? Because we have some really, I mean, big time authors in the group, which is so cool to hear from people that have been doing this for 20 years and that are willing to share with us, and so many of them will ask them lots of questions, and their continual answer is like, okay, how I got to be successful is I practiced. Like, I read in my genre, I wrote in my genre, I listened to my editor, and I had my butt in the chair every single day. And I worked at it and I worked at it, I worked at it and I worked at it, I worked at it. And, Stephen King, I think it was him, I once said something like, the first million words that you write, the first book, what was that, 4 or 5 books, novels that a person writes are not very good. Like, it takes a while for a person to find their stride with writing. I would agree. It's like with anything else. I would totally agree with that. It just takes practice and determination. Healthy Love says, I love the surfing comparison. Well, thanks. Yeah, it's like that with learning anything new. When you're first doing it, you're getting a bunch of weight, you're swallowing a bunch of water, you're getting waves in the face. It's no fun. You're paddling, you're thinking, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe everybody else makes it look so effortless. And it can be really discouraging, when you can't even do the basics and everybody else is having a great time and you're not. It I'm learning Spanish right now too on that Duolingo app, and it's the same. Talk about some like weird, crazy, unresolved issues that have come up. I had some really, actually, I don't think I've ever had a good, I didn't, never had a good foreign language instructor as a kid. I had one when I was in Italy who was really, really a nice woman, but everybody else I've ever had has just been a total controlling, abusive, awful, horrible person who hated children. Just awful. Like, they should not be working with kids. And so I have all of these, like, I didn't realize that I had all of this fear surrounding learning another language and all of these feelings of inadequacy and like, I'm never going to learn this, and complete overwhelm. And it's been interesting for me to watch as I go through. The cool thing too is it's an app, so you're not dealing any embarrassment or shame that surfaces. It's just me and the app, which is really cool. So it lessens the embarrassment because you're not dealing with another person there, but it's amazing how I'm like, man, here I am again, like that 6-year-old kid or like that 12-year-old kid back in foreign language class, getting embarrassed in front of class or feeling like a total failure, studying so hard for a test and then getting it back and getting like an F-, and just all of his feelings of like discouragement and like, I'm never going to get this. And maybe I'm just not cut out for foreign languages and all of this stuff, and trying to change my self-talk around that now and realize, okay, you can get this. It's going to take practice. Keep at it, keep at it. So, and I think too, so I would consider positively, I don't even know if, I guess it's being positive, right? like saying that kind of stuff to yourself. But in many ways, I feel like it's just being real, like it's being realistic. If we embrace having that growth mindset, if you can get to that place, and it's, I struggle with it too, but if we can move in that direction on a more regular basis of, life is about growth, and growth is about, it's something new, and it's about change, and it's about struggle. And there's oftentimes a lot of pain that goes along with it because it's struggle, it's doing something different. But if we can have that growth mindset in as many ways as possible in our life, you know, it just makes life so much easier and so much more enjoyable. And I think too, then we're really more in sync with the natural process of things. Um, in Buddhism, there is a term called um, the beginner's mind, and I love their attitude about this. But it's the concept that it's a very like revered state of being, and it's when a person does something different for the very first time, when they're a brand new beginner at something. And it's so revered because you can only be at that place once. Like it's just that spark that kicks something off. And if you think about it that way, like I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like it really is just like this magical, mystical, amazing place where, your life really just starts to open up. And the thing with being a beginner at anything, it's like having two left feet and you're clumsy and awkward and inept and you don't know what you're doing and it's embarrassing and, all of these things. And um, letting ourselves embracing that and realize this is all part of it. This is part of that growth process is for things to be that way, and to not expect them to be anything else. It's huge. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here and see what people are talking about. That's a very valid point. Bricks and Feathers, thank you for sharing that. Says positively reframing isn't just mental trickery. It extinguishes negative emotions that are arising from the fight or flight center of the amygdala. Consciously finding a way to change the meaning of what's being experienced reduces the flood of stress related neurotransmitters. Yes, I agree. Like I was saying earlier, for me, it's all of these little different life hacks to get myself out of overwhelm have really been very helpful. And, setting a timer, doing little power sprints, whatever it is, cleaning, writing, what have you, super powerful. It's fun. Like it really is fun. When you can do stuff like that, it becomes fun. Um, kind of just figuring out, okay, how do I get out of overwhelm and taking small action towards stuff? And for me, writing 500 words a day is the old me that might have felt overwhelming, but the new me is like, okay, that's nothing. Like I can do that. And, a really short amount of time. Like it's so, for me, 500 words is so small that it's hard for me to not do that. So trying, I don't know, practicing that is very helpful. And Renee says, I'm signing off at 11. This was fun and I will be back. Thank you. Thanks, survivors. Awesome. Have a good night. Yes. Healthy Love says every creation takes time, commitment, and effort, and tears of joy and sweat. Seriously, it's growing through it. I love that. It is. It's growing through it, not just going through it, growing through it. Growing through it and creating and delivering babies ain't fun. Art is like delivering babies. It absolutely is. And I would say, too, every creation, just like every pregnancy is different. Sometimes you have easy pregnancies and sometimes you have really difficult ones. And for me, that's what I'm learning with my books is every single book is its own journey. It has its own high moments and low moments and things and lessons learned and challenges and all of it. It's its own. It really is like having having a baby. It's its own thing, minus all the crying and the vomit and the dirty diapers. But it's its own thing. I had mentioned this before too. Speaking of kind of like the amount of work that goes into something. I used to work at, this was years ago, I used to work at a nursing home, and one of the ladies there had Alzheimer's. And I think I've told you guys this story before, but bear with me for people that haven't heard it. So this story has always resonated with me. So this lady had like literally no short-term memory whatsoever. Like you could walk in her room and 10 seconds, have a conversation with her. 10 seconds later, she'd be like, oh, and when did you get here? And who are you? I mean, just no short-term memory. She had been an artist and had her room was full of her paintings, and she was fantastic, very talented woman. And she was talking to another resident in the nursing home, um, who also had Alzheimer's, and the other resident was like, "Oh my goodness, this art is just fantastic." And so then the first gal would say, "Well, thank you very much." And I was a painter, and the gal says, "Well, boy, you just really have a lot of talent." And the other gal would get upset, and she's like, "It is not talent. I worked really hard for years and years and years, nights and weekends, and this is thousands of hours of training and practice, and it was not natural talent." And she could speak so articulately and thoroughly about her painting and all of the work that went into that. It was what stuck with me. But then they would both forget they had the conversation, and then it would start back up again. Or the other lady would be like, "Well, my goodness, these paintings are just wonderful. You sure have a lot of talent." And the other lady would say, "Well, it's not talent. I spent, a really long time learning how to paint." And it was cute. I mean, it was sad, but it was cute at the same time. But what stuck with me was that was the one thing she really remembered, was how much that was so drilled into her brain of how much time, energy, and effort she spent at something. So I think the lesson that we can all take away from that is anything worth having is generally going to be hard won. Whatever that might be, with painting or writing a book, or I think especially boundaries, and getting your life back on track, and tuning into yourself, and saying no to people, and cutting off relationships, and certain relationships, and doing all of this. This is going to be a hard won victory, and it's something that's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of practice. And the more practice you have, the more aha moments you're going to have. It's with anything: writing, painting, setting boundaries, understanding other people, understanding yourself. And you're going to have these moments of clarity where you're like, oh my God, how did I not see this sooner? It's across the board, and anything, and just being patient with yourself as that learning curve progresses, because that's what it is. And it's always, if you're ever living a life, if you're ever truly living, you're going to always be in some stage of a learning curve, no matter what it is, whether if it's with surfing, or learning Spanish, or learning how to write books, or how to start a YouTube channel, or how to, plant a garden, or whatever it might be for you. Okay. Let's see, Jennifer, where was the first part of your question here? Alex says, why is my ex-wife flaunting her new bloke on social media and emailing asking how I am after a year, when she was pretty horrific? My heart says yes, but my head says don't even think about replying. Yeah, go with your head on that one, because what she's doing is very common for an emotionally abusive person to do. It's that twisting of the knife in multiple ways. So on one hand, it's like showing off the new guy, which is planting jealousy and seeds of insecurity and pain within you, right? To see, oh, she's so happy and seems so in love. And this guy, obviously, because she keeps saying how wonderful he is, and how, all these pictures of them kissing and flowers, all of this stuff. It's just twisting the knife. And then for her, to email you just shows you that everything she's put on social media is a lie, because actually now she's cheating on him, right? Like she's messaging you and there's no reason, like she's stirring the pot, and it's just a bunch of drama. And she's also showing she still doesn't have a moral compass, right? So she's got this new guy who I'm sure has no idea that she's messaging you and trying to kind of rekindle things with you. And so you don't need anybody like that in your life. So I wouldn't try really hard to second guess why she's doing what she's doing, other than the fact that it's really not cool. And it shows that she has no moral compass, and that knowing yourself well enough to be like, you know what? I don't need that. I do not need that kind of drama. Like, I don't need a woman who is, got multiple men in her life and she's entertaining all these different guys. Like, I don't want that. I don't need that. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Yeah, Alex says, yeah, she doesn't care. I don't know why she's wasting her time pretending she does. She's so cold, like an ice queen. It's just all a game with these people. It's all a game with these people. And it makes her feel, it builds up her ego. It's like a short-lived way for her to build up her self-esteem, to just really kind of see how many men she can have going at a time and getting the attention and putting herself in the center of attention and all of this. It's just chaos and craziness and drama. So I would just say set up her emails. And Alex says, yeah, she was cheating on me too, and probably for most of the 11 years. I would say set up her emails to go straight to your spam folder. So that way you're not even upset and rattled at all, because you're not even going to see them. Like, just set them up to go to spam. And I would block her across the board. And here's the thing with people like that, because they know exactly what they're doing, but they're going to deny it. So that's the thing. So trying to get clarity from them and ask, like, why are you doing this? And what, trying to get clarity is not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to get you further into that web, because she's going to play stupid and innocent and naive, and, or just lie to you, right? Like, you mean so much to me. And, I really messed up a good thing. And, you were a really great guy, and I'm sorry I didn't appreciate it. Now, in either it's going to go like, oh, can you give me another chance? Or it's going to go, I just want you to know, I just want you to be happy, and I just want us to be friends. Like, either way, it's just, it's crazy. It's crazy town. Like, it's a one-way ticket to crazy town. Like, don't go to crazy town. Nothing good comes from crazy town. So don't fall for it. See it for what it is. You don't need somebody that has had a pattern of lying and cheating to you. Like, when a person shows you that they have no moral compass, believe them. Don't believe words, because words are easy to say. Believe actions. Like, she's already had this pattern of insanity with you, and she's showing that she hasn't changed a bit. She's still doing it, right? She's lying and being inappropriate with this new guy with you. So, don't fall for words that she's changed when her behavior shows that no, she hasn't changed. And you can't ever trust her. And if there's no trust there, then there's no relationship. There's no potential for a relationship or a friendship. Like, that's another definition people get confused about. They're like, well, my ex says they want to be friends. And it's like, what is that even? That's nuts. I fell for it too. There's no judgment. I'm just saying it's nuts if you think about it. Like, a friendship is, the definition of friendship is a state of mutual, right? Two-way street, mutual sense of trust and support. If it's a one-way street where you're the one giving all the trust and support, and she's like lying and cheating and stealing and misusing all of that, then that's not a friendship. That's you being manipulated. There's a big difference. Just because a person is friendly doesn't mean that they're actually a friend. Big difference. You can't be friends. It's impossible to have a friendship with a manipulative person. All you have is a manipulationship, and that is never going to work well, and it's never going to end well. So, okay. Alex says, yeah, I feel bad for him. He's probably a nice guy who has no idea what he's in for, and she will destroy him. Yeah, it sucks. Like, he says, oh, yeah, I'm so done with her. I'm not a doormat anymore. It's just annoying. Yeah, it is annoying. I agree completely. And infuriating. It's like you want to just yell at them and be like, oh my God, just go. Like, just go away. I don't care. Go live your fake little sick life somewhere else. I'm just so done with your ass. Like, just get out of my hair. I'm done. And they don't go. Like, they're just there. It's frustrating. Okay. There was a question. Yeah, Truth Seeker says, yeah, and he'll have to learn the hard way too. People can try to warn the next person, but they always believe the person who is flattering and love bombing them. Yeah. And that's the thing, like that charming person. Well, anyway, like a person's only going to believe if they're ready to believe. Like he's going to have to probably go through a lot of pain before it's difficult to get through to the new person because everybody thinks that they would see it and they don't. So, okay. Miss Gam says, how do you separate a narcissist from somebody who is emotionally unstable? This goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier. Real quick, this will be the last question, and then we'll do our guided meditation thing. Instead of trying to figure out what am I dealing with? Are they bipolar? Like, can they be changed? I mean, are they abusive? Are they a narcissist? Are they a sociopath? Are they borderline? I mean, I heard like if they're borderline, then maybe they could change. And and maybe like, is it because their childhood? Like, instead of trying to spend all this time and energy trying to figure them out, all you have to do is ask yourself, what do you want for your life? That's it. And once you have that clarity, they either meet that standard or they don't. And you can make it very clear, because to me, either way is a problem, right? Either they're a narcissist and it's a problem, or they're emotionally unstable and that's still a problem. In my book, neither one of those two things is workable. So that goes back to there's a difference between a partner and a project. And so if you've got this person who's emotionally unstable and, it's just like exhausting all of your time and energy and all of this and trying to get them to be okay. Like they're obviously not in a good place. They're not ready to be dating and they don't realize that, but you can't fix them. Like we don't have control over other people. And so, they need to work on themselves. If that person's not ready, willing, or able to work on themselves, they don't see they have a problem, then they're not going to be changing anytime soon. And even if they do see that there's a problem, you're talking years of intensive work and introspection with them examining this kind of stuff. So you would be in for a long haul. And then you have to ask yourself, is that even something that I would want to go down? How much time? I always encourage people to have a line in the sand, know where your deal breakers are. And to ask yourself, okay, like what kind of changes do I need to see and in what time period? Then you'll have your answer as to how long you're willing to hang on for. Because I'll tell you, you can go to a dozen different mental health clinicians and you can get a dozen different answers. Personality disorders are not an exact science. They're definitely there's more of an art to diagnosing them. And 9 times out of 10, narcissistic personality disorder is not very commonly diagnosed. And it's one of those disorders because it's so difficult to diagnose, because narcissists can, if they're more self-aware, they can be very charming, they can be very convincing, they can really make their issues into a couple issue, into a relationship issue. Most narcissists, unless they're very extreme, where they have no self-awareness and they're brash and arrogant and difficult and demanding and ridiculous, you know, but even then, like, it just depends on the mental health clinician's level of training. And even then, with narcissism, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to tell the narcissist or the other person that that person's actually a narcissist. It's just a sticky thing. So if you're holding on, waiting around to get a clear-cut diagnosis, or to try to diagnose it yourself, thinking like, okay, everything is workable, but if they're a narcissist, that's my line, and then it's not workable, I will tell you, then that really is slippery slope thinking, and it can keep you stuck in really bad situations for a very long time. So I would encourage you to not think about terms in such, think about this situation in such very black and white terms. Think about it in terms of like, where are, because not everything is workable, right? But the reason that personality disorders like narcissism or antisocial are so problematic, it's not the label, it's the behavior. It's that they have pervasive and persistent problematic behavior. And even if the label person, even if they got rid of personality disorders, okay, you're still talking about behaviors. It's if a person has an ongoing pattern of certain behavior, there comes a point where we need to be able to distance ourselves from that person. It does not even matter whether or not they will change. It's how much damage are you willing to let them do in your life up until, and to what point, you know? So I like I'd mentioned earlier, I encourage people, back things way up. Like, don't, and I get it, because I've been there, like, where you're thinking, when you are stuck in that black and white thinking of, if they're a narcissist, then it's not workable and I'll leave. But if they're, if it's just they had a bad childhood and they're emotionally unstable and they're quote unquote just verbally abusive or just emotionally abusive, that stuff's not workable. But so please just know that. But like, if you're stuck in that, to back things way up, and a healthy level of boundaries and standards, a healthy relationship with ourselves, is realizing that being in a situation that's it's persistently confusing, perpetually confusing, or causing us mental anguish, or that's just not nourishing for us, is a situation that you really need to not be in. It's not going to end well. It's not an equally yoked relationship. It's one person, us usually, being the caretaker, acting like a parent or a teacher or a nurse, or a parent, or I said a parent, or like that's when you know that this is not an equally yoked relationship. One person is being like a parent, the other person's acting like a project. They're going to come to resent you. You're going to come to resent them. It's just not going to work. So get clear on how long you're willing to try to set boundaries and work on things before you do actually leave. Oh, you're so welcome. Healthy Love says, thank you so much for support from you and from the group during my move. While I was sick and out of it, you created a space where I could be empowered and honest without being seen as crazy. And I thank you. You are so welcome. And I hope things are getting more settled and situated for you, and that you're feeling better too. Okay. So with that said, let's take a moment, get grounded, and just chill out and be in our body and enjoy that. Enjoy that process. Oh, gosh. Okay. So take some time to get comfortable. If you're laying down, get comfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, place your feet on the ground, uncross your legs. This has been my new favorite stretch lately, to just gently pull my head forward. Helps to just kind of loosen up my shoulder muscles. Let's just take a few deep breaths while we let our body just be and get comfortable. In through the nose. And out through your mouth. Allowing for each breath to travel deeper down into the bottom of your lungs, down into your stomach. With every exhale, exhaling as much tension, stress, or pain that you might be storing in your body. Feeling your muscles grow heavy as they relax. Bringing your attention now to the top of your head, slowly scanning your head for any tension, pain, or stress that you might be holding. Bringing your attention down to your eyes, relaxing them, relaxing your cheeks, your jaw, allowing your jaw to hang open and letting your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Feeling the weight of your face as you allow it to fully relax. Bringing your attention to your neck, to your shoulders, consciously making the effort to let your shoulders go heavy, feeling them drop down. If you're laying down, allowing your chest to open, letting your arms fall back. If you're sitting down, rolling your shoulders back, opening your chest, letting your arms fall in whatever way is most comfortable. Continuing to bring your attention down into your chest, your rib cage, your stomach, your hips, relaxing your lower back, noticing if you're storing any tension in any areas of your chest or your back. And continuing to breathe. Now letting your legs fall whatever way might be most comfortable. Relaxing your hips, your thighs, your knees, your calves, your feet, and your toes. Taking a few deep breaths now and feeling how effortlessly it is for those breaths to travel far down your body, into your lungs, past your stomach, and into your legs. Sending that oxygenated blood down through your body, nourishing every single part of your body, your cells, your muscles. Bringing your awareness to the middle of your chest, visualizing a healing, peaceful, calming, restorative white light in the middle of your chest. With each breath, visualizing that light growing larger and brighter as that light travels up through your neck, into your head, down your arms, down your chest, down your legs, healing and restoring every single cell of your body that it touches, sending that beautiful, calming, restorative white light throughout your body. And now visualizing that white light as it extends past your body. Perhaps at first it's only maybe half an inch past your skin. See if you can extend it a few inches at least, to the point where you can't really quite tell where your body begins and where this light ends. Like you are a giant, energetic light. Notice if you feel that light pulsating, perhaps in your hands, or in your stomach, or in your feet, and how good that feels to just be paying attention to this amazing white energetic light. And this light connects you to everything that is good and right with the world, with your authentic self. There is such a sense of peace and calm and joy all at the same time. And now let's take some time. We'll take maybe, let's say, the next 15 breaths for you to send some of that light out into the world, maybe perhaps to somebody in particular that you know could use some, perhaps people in the chat tonight or any other person in your life. Going and giving them a really big energetic hug, just letting them know that they matter, sharing some of that healing, amazing light with them. And so let's do that now for the next 15 breaths. And when you're ready, come on back and give yourself a really big energetic hug, acknowledging everything that you are doing right, letting yourself know that you matter, that you have value, and that your wants and needs and feelings are just as important as anybody else's. That you're doing a good job and that you are healing in both big and small ways every single day, even if you're not aware of it, but you are. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Okay, so thank you guys so much. And Manju has a quick question here about boundaries. I think one of the best, we can definitely talk about that next week. One of the best books I feel like I've read, and it was a pretty quick read on boundaries, was a book by Adeline Birch called Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship, I think it was. She really does just a fantastic job with defining what boundaries are and what they feel like, how they've been eroded, and kind of some steps we can take to get them more back into alignment. So I would highly recommend checking out that book. Oh, you have that book. Okay. She says, I love it. I'm going to reread it. Do that. And let's talk about this next week because that's such a big question. It's such a very valid question. Okay. So, okay, guys, have a fantastic week. I will see you Tuesday live stream for an hour with me and Angie here at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I'll see you Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can heal from this. And you guys are doing a great job. You really, really are. You've come a long way. I hope you can see that as much as I can. So take care. Have a great rest of your week. Good night.